Good afternoon. I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for September 5th. It is 1:30 p.m. Welcome to all of the guests in our forum room and in the gallery today. We have probably a dozen or so, and I'm sure more joining on our Zoom platform. So welcome all. For those who are in the room, you cannot see, but Councillor Keller-Harranti is joining us as well remotely. Welcome, Councillor, and welcome all those around the table. We have a relatively long agenda, I think, today. So we will commence. I would expect at some point we will have a motion, perhaps from Councillor Melnick, that we extend beyond 4 hours. But even with that, there is perhaps some doubt that we will get done today. One councillor has indicated to me that they have another council-related commitment at 7 o'clock. So if we are not finished today, we will, our discussions today, we will have to consider recessing to a further date. But in any event, we'll get started and see what we can accomplish during the afternoon. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Councillor Manning.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wonder if I could add to the agenda, would mean changing item 10 to an in-camera session regarding contracts, and then moving item 10 to number 11.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Melnick, I will take that as a motion to amend the agenda in those particulars. Are there any other changes proposed for today's agenda? All right, treating Councillor Melnick's comments as a motion. I have a motion before us to amend the agenda to change item 10 to an in-camera item concerning contracts and renumber adjournment to item 11. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And might I then have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Councillor Melnick? All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have 3 sets of minutes for approval today, beginning with the regular meeting minutes of November 7th, 2023. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Seeing nothing, may I have a motion, please? Deputy Mayor Hall, I will say, a motion that council approve the minutes of November 7th, 2023 regular council meeting as presented. All those in favor? There are none opposed. Similarly, there are minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of November 14th. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Not, I would look for a motion. Councillor Melnick, thank you. The motion to be that council approve the minutes of the November 14, 2023 committee of the whole meeting as presented. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And finally, we have before us minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of, not final. The budget presentation meetings of November 21st and 22nd. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Councillor Waxer?
Ready to make the motion.
That council approve the minutes of the November 21st and 22nd, 2023 budget presentation meetings as presented. All those in favor? There are none opposed. And now finally, the committee of the whole meeting minutes of November 28. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? If not, may I have a motion, please, that council approve the minutes of the November 28, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting as presented? Councillor Demota, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 4, correspondence. We have nothing on the agenda, nothing has arisen. Mr. Given. That takes us to delegations. We have one scheduled delegation, Jasper-Hakone Chamber of Commerce, and I invite you momentarily. There are many people in the gallery, and I believe one of the previous meetings, the minutes of which we have just approved, I did provide notice to the public that they would be welcome to make presentations to council at this particular meeting. So if there are others in the room who wish to make any sort of presentation to council, I will invite you to do that once we hear from the scheduled delegation, which is the Jasper-Hakone Chamber of Commerce. So President Mills, the floor is yours.
Actually, you get me first. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for taking us into consideration for this presentation. I'd also like to take a moment to thank CAO Bill Given for spending a few hours with us talking about some of the concerns and considerations that we have. And it was extremely helpful. And I know from my personal perspective as ED, it certainly was appreciated. I'd also like to just briefly mention that the Chamber of Commerce is alive and well and engaged. And our purpose today is to think about those things that we can do to further collaborate and to be more proactive in working with our partners and friends in the community. We serve everybody and everything that you could think of in terms of what Jasper Chamber represents, and that is every sector, that is every size business, that is everyone from essential services that are provided in our community, so nonprofits, hospitality, retail, the list goes on. And we just want to make sure that Mayor and Council are very aware of the work that we do, and that will be included in I'm not sure what we want to call it, the presentation that President Mills will be making momentarily. And with that, I will turn the microphone over to him. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Badalov, and thank you, everyone, your worship, council members, CEO Given. Just to echo some of Patty's points, again, we did have a really great discussion meeting with CEO Given, so I wanted to extend our thanks and gratitude for him making his time in a busy schedule. After a very busy 2 days prior to that, it was really engaging and really provided a lot of insight to myself and the board. We've tried to pull a cross section of small, medium, and large local businesses. Some which own their own premises and some that rent over the last couple of weeks, and tried to get this letter in for some light reading last night to yourself. With concerns on the potential impact of the proposed budget. The proposed increase was 16% in 2024, which was twice as high as some other municipalities within Alberta, which would equate to about a 40% increase just over a 3-year period. With a mill rate of 5 to 1, meaning commercial properties generate 80% of the tax revenues, Jasper's business community has been forced to shoulder an enormous and disproportionate amount of local tax and utility burden, and we'd like to have more of an open conversation, be part of the table when it comes to that determination of the mill rate moving forward. When I say a looming crisis, there's been a very real concern that's been communicated to us, and again, this short 2-week period amongst many businesses that are renting their premise that may not have yet felt the impact of the tax and utility increase introduced by the MOJ, but it's simply a matter of time before they do. And I'm going through this letter, I'm just going to highlight some points, and I trust that having that in front of you and giving it a read. So we spoke with 4 different retail businesses that have recently renewed their leases over the past 18 months. And they have found that their rents have increased anywhere between 10 and 24%, which is significantly higher than the 3 to 5% they have all mentioned historically it would be expected. In regards to debt management, currently sat in 2022 at 11 million, which approximately was 27% of the debt limit of 39 million. And then by 2025, the debt is expected to reach 36.7 million, which equates to about 95% of that, which only leaves a very small 2.3 cushion to support extraordinary circumstances. And as we've unfortunately seen in recent years, the extraordinary circumstances have become quite ordinary. In regards to the Jasper Recreation Complex, the entire community is, and from what I hear, is very much looking forward to the opening of the refurbished and enhanced activity center and the benefits that will deliver and continue to deliver to the community. From a personal perspective, looking at the facilities in the gym, the pool, curling club, and the rink, it's going to be a fantastic facility, which is really exciting to see. But it has come at an extremely high price, and particularly after a 43% increase in that cost. And it's our hope that the chamber and being a voice of the business community can be a part of those conversations with very big projects like this moving forward. Some areas of potential savings that may have been communicated. We are sensitive to those areas that we consider vital social services and the need to protect the vulnerable part of the community. However, reinforcing earlier statements, we feel that this proposed budget will now create a larger vulnerable population within the community. We did have a couple questions our way about commercial leasing options and if those have been explored, and would that pull interest rates down to help manage access to capital and overall debt levels. The capital expenditures outlined in the 5-year plan, the section of the budget, make up a significant portion of the overall increase. And we strongly, and I say we, I mean the business community of Jasper, there are areas that we could make some substantial savings and hope that these expenditures are questioned more diligently moving forward within the budget decision. The transit plan has definitely been a hot topic over the last months, and we do understand that the MOJ can receive a $5 million grant regarding the capital expenditures of the program. However, with a minimal additional liability of $3 million that the community would bear to further fund the project. Electric buses was talked about and recently within the city of Edmonton. It's been very well documented that 75% of the e-buses within the city of Edmonton are not roadworthy and require very expensive upgrades and retrofits moving forward. And I think based on some recent documentation that electric buses and or vehicles may be kind of inadequate or unreliable in colder climates such as northern Alberta. So just kind of having more of a conversation there. And we want to encourage sustainability in regards to that, but we just want to make sure that's the right sustainability. And again, in closing, we just don't feel that the proposed budget recognizes the financial challenges that many businesses and residents are currently facing. And that's, small, medium, large. Everyone comes to Jasper, they're going to need a hotel room to stay in, and they may not necessarily need that, new North Face shirt or something like that. So there's different stains, but trying to keep those municipal costs as low as possible while maintaining adequate and realistic service levels was a reasonable emergency cushion. It is therefore I end my conversation here today that we strongly encourage council to hopefully amend this budget and we request some reductions that can bring the budget increase to a more manageable and palatable 7 to 8%. And again, on behalf of the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce and our members of the business community, thank you, Your Worship, and council members and CEO Given for listening to us here this afternoon.
Thank you, President Mills and Mrs. Padwell, for your presentation. Councillors, do you have questions? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation. I appreciate the thought and the investigation to go into the letter to us, and we appreciate having the business community come to us with their concerns. I'm asking a question for clarity, and that is understanding that retail leases have gone up. Typically, when a retail lease is re-signed, is that re-signed for another 5 to 10 years, or is it an annual lease with escalation clauses? In other words, a retail lease has gone up 24%, but over the next 5 years, is that retail lease now stable?
I've heard a little of both. I've heard 5-year, 10-year, and possible 20 years, which, obviously depending on that retail lease could go, but that's kind of what I've heard with terms, and a little fluctuation within that.
And the reason I ask is that some leases may have clauses for utilities to be included, to be added. But I just trying to understand, when we have an increase of 24%, which is extremely high and disappointing, does that mean that that lease is now at that level for 5 years?
Other questions from councillors? I will then ask something, and firstly, President Mills and to the chamber, I appreciate your recognition in your presentation and in the letter that the current budget discussion and the mill rate discussion, although related, are not concurrent. And so I respect and acknowledge your request to get further engaged in the mill rate discussion when that arrives. I appreciate that you've drawn that distinction. In your letter and in your comments, you spoke about the looming crisis. And in the last sentence of the first paragraph, you talk about growing evidence showing that the fiscal policies of the municipality are contributing to vulnerability. When you say fiscal policies, do you mean the budget or do you mean other policies? What can I take as the essence of your comment there?
Yeah, it'd be a little bit of both, I suppose, more so on the budget and being a part of the table and seeing how that operates. And again, we understand that a lot of this conversation started, May or June of 2023. We may not have been able to be at the table, but more so on the on the budget, on the where the finances are going and how we're spending, and just being more engaged on behalf of the community in those conversations and understanding a little bit more of those policies.
Thank you for that. Other questions from councillors? Sorry, Mr. Given. Oh, Patty, I said somebody was pointing. Sorry. Mrs. Pavlov.
Apologies. I just wanted to circle back on something that Councillor Melnick mentioned, and that was regarding the stability of those increases at 24%, et cetera. A lot of it has to do, of course, with the person who owns the property. And that obviously will circle down to the person who is the lessee. And at this time, we don't have specific data that would support that it would be stable or that it could increase. And I think that uncertainty is what is causing a lot of stress for many business operators. Thank you.
Councillor Demota.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship, and through you to our presenters representing the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce. I really appreciate the information that we have in front of us, and I appreciate the advocacy. I'm not here to debate any of the information that came forward. I'm just grateful that we're receiving it, and hopefully if you're around a little later when we're discussing the budget, I think that administration has prepared some information for us to contemplate and debate today. And I think that this, is very helpful for us, and appreciate your time here. Thank you.
Other questions of councillors? Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and through you to President Mills and Ms. Catwell. Thank you very much for coming. I don't have questions, but I wanted to extend my appreciation for your letter, your information. It's information that is new to us, and it's great. And it's great that the business community is about today to support you. Thank you.
If there's nothing else, I too will add my thanks to your engagement. This is what we hope for. So we're very happy that you have presented today, given us your letter in advance. That was nice to have that to read last night. So appreciate that, and encourage you to continue to engage with us. And thank you for your comments with respect to CAO, given taking time to meet with your executive. Much appreciated. And as we've said here, thank you for the information. It will inform council as we move forward with our budget deliberations later today and until we get to the end of this, whenever that might be. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
As I indicated earlier, we are happy to hear from other individuals who may wish to speak with council. We're delighted to have that form of engagement. So if anybody wishes to speak, generally our rules provide for a 3-minute presentation and then additional time for questions from council. We often don't hold strictly to those timelines. So if you have 1 minute of information or 4 or 5, that's fine. We will be delighted to entertain you. But this is your opportunity. We will next get into some of the business items that we have to deal with before we come back to budget discussions. But you're all welcome to simply wait until we get to those budget discussions. But that will be debate within council. So if you wish to address council before that debate, this would be your opportunity.
I don't have a presentation, but I have a question.
Could you just come forward, please, to the microphone?
I don't have a presentation, but I do have a question. Is this an appropriate time to ask it?
It might be.
Okay.
Depends on the, I'm sorry.
For the purposes of the people we need to identify the speaker.
Oh, I'm Sandra Kuhn, a member of the Jasper-Hakone Chamber of Commerce, among other things. And my question is with regard to the human resources, increases in human resources. And it's more a question about process. When the directors put forth their budget requests in the budgeting process, have those items, are they at the point where whether it be a transportation coordinator or a housing coordinator, where a job description has been determined? Maybe that's a question for Mr. Gibbon.
Maybe it is. Mr. Gibbon?
Yeah, Your Worship, I'm happy to speak to that if it's okay with the chair. Provide the information for the public. So our process for any position request is that the staff or service area requesting that position are required to fill out a form. It's called a position request form. It's not very catchy name, but that's what it is. And we ask them to evaluate any other vacancies in the department, provide some overall context about the intent of the job, pay grade, classification, other items like that. But the job description is not finalized until council approves the position.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kuhn. Others?
I would like to speak.
Yes, Mr. Andrew, please come forward.
Your worship, councillors, given. My name is George Andrew. I'm a third generation local businessman, and I own and operate the Astoria Hotel, Papa George's Restaurant, and the Dead Dog Pub. We, I believe, are all aware that tourism is one of the businesses that has been most affected by COVID, and that tourism is Jasper's major industry. It does not appear to me that this council is fully sensitive to that fact. So, and I think the reason is that there's no one in this council who is the owner operator of a tourism business. So you do not feel the pain. There's no one here, I think, that didn't get a paycheck during COVID, but I had 37 staff that did not get a paycheck during COVID. It cost $3,000 a day of unavoidable expenses to operate the Astoria Hotel and the restaurant and pub. So that's utilities, insurance, municipal taxes, federal taxes, mortgage, etc. I was closed or seriously affected for about 150 days during COVID. So if you do the math, that's just shy of $500,000. So I did get some assistance, but it was not adequate. And I'm struggling to recover from COVID. So as I see my expenses rise and the state of the economy, it is very difficult for me to meet my expenses. I think that I'm not alone in businesses in Jasper, and I think there's a lot of frustration in the business community because we do not think that we have an effective voice on the council. We don't think that we don't have a cohesive group, of course, the Chamber of Commerce, but there are a lot of people who don't belong to it and don't feel that they have any say. So an increase of 13% or more is crushing. I've watched my expenses rise at the Astoria to a point where it's not really profitable anymore. And so, you know, I'm confounded of what to do. The Astoria Hotel was built by my grandfather's brother in 1925, and I think this is the first time it is in peril over that period. So I just would like you to think as a council in terms of an owner of a business in this town, not an employee. So think what you would do if you were faced with the types of increases that we are at this point in time. I think fiscal restraint is something that we need to see from our town council. It's serious fiscal restraint. So I know it's expensive to run a community, but the ability of the business part of Jasper is having trouble. I know that we have some very large corporate businesses, but there's quite a few of us independents as well. So we just like to make say my part.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Appreciate those heartfelt remarks. I will look to councillors if there are any questions. Moving on, I think your message was heard, so thank you very much.
I didn't want to make any comments because it'll look like an infomercial.
Hello, Council. My name is Logan, Ireland, and I am here.
And I am going to interrupt.
Right, yes.
Is it your intent to speak specifically about Uplift
It
Jasper
is.
Mural Festival?
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I will relinquish the chair to Deputy Mayor Hall and declare that I have conflict on this matter, so I will leave the room until somebody recalls me. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Island.
Hello, councillors, and also everyone in the room and listening at home. Again, my name is Logan, and I wanted to speak on behalf of Uplift, as Oliver and myself are the conduit between the festival and the community. And I just wanted to remind or state to the community what Uplift's goals are, as the council is deciding currently on a $25,000 sponsorship for the festival to continue again in 2024. And what I wanted to state was that Uplift has two primary goals, and those can be separated into the intangibles and the tangibles. So the intangibles are the things that are pretty difficult to put a value to, such as our school kids growing up with Olavolo as their backdrop to recess, or an indigenous artist getting to share their story on a Jasper wall in the same treaty that they grew up in. Those are the soft benefits that have an emotional impact on our community, and I believe are very healthy for us. And they're also beyond the scope of finances. So when we get into budget talks and the community is dealing with some really real issues, I'm sure it can be very difficult for council to weigh how to appropriately assign dollars. So I wanted to also put forth that at Uplift's core, we are designed also for a tangible benefit to the community to increase tourism in our town and become a new anchor product. At Uplift's onset, we talked with the stakeholders such as Tourism Jasper, various business owners, hotels and restaurants as to when the best time to hold such a mural festival would be. And it came back that May was the perfect timing, as the town has the ability to host more people and is not quite at the full summer numbers yet. And it's also a favorable time to paint. So May was the perfect opportunity to host a mural festival. And as we grow, our intent is for all the dollars that have been put forth by the municipality, by our 22 other sponsors, by individuals in the community, at Kickstarters, at parties, buying our Uplift bucket hats. Those are meant to be investments. Those are not meant to be donations. As we continue to grow, we truly believe that the Mural Festival will be able to put heads in beds, put seats in restaurants, have people going on tours, and extend Jasper's tourism to a new market, and also into a new month where we could potentially be full. So we hope that that goes into your deliberations when you're deciding, making these very difficult decisions about where to put dollars. And we also hope that the community, finds some understanding in that if dollars do go to Uplift, that we consider it an investment, and we will work very hard to make sure that that ROI comes back to the community and uplifts us all.
Thank you, Mr. Ireland. I look to council for comments or questions. Councilor Demota.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Hall. And thank you, Mr. Ireland, for coming forward. And, it's one of those conversations that we've had in the past and that are having about the direct and indirect benefits of different things that happen in the community and what we have to discuss at budget time. And, we can use the arena as an example. There's people in the community, businesses that have a direct benefit from it being here and people coming to the community, but there are also taxpayers that may not use the arena or activity center, one or the other, but understand the indirect benefit it brings to the community and don't have an issue about that investment. And I think from my perspective, the initiatives that you've taken to beautify our community, I think really helps. in the vibrancy and, you know, and the tangible effects that it also has on top of those intangible ones. I think that many people, even the business owners here, understand that. And I think it's an important part of the conversation that we're going to have today. But, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, we have to prioritize what we're doing. And, you know, when we go from what's legislated to the nice to haves. And I think, you know, not just me personally, but others kind of go through a filtered process of, you know, is this good for the community as a whole? What are the costs? What are the social costs, fiscal costs? And then number three, is it the right thing to do? So, you know, understanding those with everybody that spoke already today, those are some of the things that are heavily weighed in our contemplation. So thanks again.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Any other questions or comments from council? All right, then I'll.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Mr. Ireland.
Does the mayor have a buzzer in his office?
See, that's better.
It's good.
Are there others wishing to speak? Yes, sir.
I'll try to take this brief. Name's Charlie Finley, just a resident. I'm gonna urge austerity. At 13.5%, that's doubling the tax bill in 7 years. Very good, thank you, sorry. When I was here for the budget meetings on the 21st and 22nd, Councillor Alan Empty asked me to look for cuts. I'm a fairly observant person and see stuff all the time around me that I find excessive. It snowed once, they've sanded my alley 3 times. Parks never sanded our alleys. The deal was when we took over from Parks, we were going to try to maintain that standard. We're doing more than Parks ever did. And in some ways, very good. But that's one of the things I see. I see there's a line in the budget for $5,000, and you're going to call me Grinch, for the Alpine Seniors Home. I think that's going towards a generator, probably, is what they're after. 4 inflatable Santa's moon and the seniors through the windows, and 10 lit up ornaments on the lawn. That's not conservation. That's excess. Every time Canadian Tire develops some new inflatable something or other, they have it. I know they have an excess of Christmas decorations over there. They can't find a place to put them. I just restrained.
Sorry, may
Certainly.
Wait.
Oh, sorry.
As much as we respect Mr. Finley.
Yes.
You're talking to council.
Yes, sorry.
You are addressing council, which is fine, and you may address in a moment.
Sorry. In the end, I'm advocating for protecting your investments because we've been burned on a lot of them. And I need those investments to be well maintained so they get a good lifespan out of our investments. Other than that, and this isn't their fault at all, but we got a camera that works that finds the sewage problems. Beautiful thing. If the sewage had been done right in the first place, we wouldn't be digging 20 holes to fix them. Nobody was watching. Same this building. I don't think haven't settled on this one. We're into another one with the rec center. I see excesses in snow removal. We plant trees and don't guard them. You might as well burn $300 in front of me. We're driving big trucks nowhere with nothing in them. Other than that, the one thing that Mr. Gibbons, well, it's come along because our capital fees weren't there for water and sewer. We've instituted a connection fee and a capital fee for both water and sewer. You use $4 worth of water in 2 months, the bill's $70. We're at the source of water for North America. Should be able to do reasonable water for a reasonable price. And I don't know how long these connection fees, capital fees are in mode for to get us where we need to be to make it right. But that can't continue either. That's all I got to say, and thank you for your ears, folks. And what you do, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Finley, and thank you for responding to the challenge issued by Councillor Keller-Granty a week or so ago. Mr. Tassoni, you indicated an interest in responding, so please come forward with.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak.
Sorry, if I may interrupt, for the benefit of people on, name please, for the benefit of people online.
My name is Ernesto Tassoni, and in regards to the $5,000 that's been asked by Council Helen, a lot of you don't know or may know, but I ran the Seniors Lodge for almost 4 years, and that lodge, it's great pride for myself in this community. But that lodge has a lot of residents in there that don't have families, don't have children left, or are part of this community. So what we can do to make a season memorable for them, I've had many residents tell me that when they move in, that's the end of the road in for them. So what a lot of you don't know is that any of those decorations or any of those activities that are done in that lodge are all done through fundraising. We sell chocolates to the community that a lot of you purchase Birdie's chocolates. That we do $5,000–6,000 a year, and that goes towards Christmas functions, Christmas activities. The bus that was purchased was done through fundraising. So the $5,000 that we're asking for the new generator has been for the last 2 years. As a lot of you may not know, last year when the Edson had the fires, a lot of these individuals were moved out of the community. For some of them that had family members, as myself, that suffer from dementia or other impacts, that really disrupts their whole life. And so we do need a stable generator in that place. We do have one currently, but unfortunately, it allows us for power for about an hour, and then we sit in the dark. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that, the $5,000 from the community, I sit on a board that's trying to raise $160,000. Yes, I've sent letters out to the business part of the communities. We've done other fundraising. We'll continue to do fundraising, whether it takes a year, 2 years, whatever that process is to buy that generator. But it's a very important part of our community, and it represents our seniors, and majority of this rooms will be seniors or are seniors that will have that impact. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that request for the $5,000.
Thank you. That clarification is appreciated. Anyone else? Mr. Day.
Come on. Is this mic hot? Oh, Jesus. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Day. I really have a question, I think, primarily about revenue. So obviously we're spending money, but when revenue is a lot of revenue line items, and the one that we do have is parking, and it went on. And yes, oops. Helen, we'll be able to hear you online if you're not. Can you hear me, Helen? Yeah, the revenue. So when we have paid parking, why have we not continued? Why don't we do it all here? Like when we maximize the potential revenue, because obviously that'll bring down our requisition. So I'm just curious to know why we don't. From the people that decided.
that we don't?
That's a very good question. Mostly it is appetite and pushback, in part from the business sector who didn't cotton to pay parking in the first place because it might drive away visitors. And so we've tried it in the busy part of the year, and we'll see how it goes. And it's possible that we could extend it to the winter season, but that is, of course, at the risk of alienating the very visitors that we need. That's the conundrum that council faces.
Not charging it sometimes. When we're at our busiest, we charge. How many months of the year do we charge for parking? Sorry, six. How much revenue, net revenue came from parking? I was trying to find it in the budget and it's very difficult to. I've seen a lot of budgets and this one confused me immensely, so.
And I will allow Mr. Given to answer, but I think we don't yet have full details of this year's receipts from parking. We have gross numbers, but there are various payments to be made from it, but Mr. Given may be closer to the number than I am.
Sure. Well, Your Worship, so in the operating budget under the Protective and Legislative Services profile page, you can see the revenue expense and net surplus deficit in the document, the budget document. It's numbered page 37. There it shows a visitor paid parking forecasted revenue for 2024, and I believe this was based on the amendments that council made. Forecasted revenue of $1.15 million in revenue, and the 1.03 million in expenses. Of course, there are bank charges and service fees for the service provider that come off. So that is in the budget under the visitor paid parking line item in the Protective and Legislative Services. The administration is pretty comfortable that that number is achievable based on the actuals from this year. And I think council has the opportunity to have some discussion about whether they see a need to increase the program or increase the revenue expectation. But that's where it lies in the budget document.
And the profit side, the net side though?
So, Your Worship, as I said, 1.15 million in forecasted revenue, 1.03 million in expenses. And so the expenses, Your Worship, reflect interdepartmental transfers. And so this is a bit of the complexity of a municipal budget and how it's different than a personal budget or a business budget. We have to show a transfer of revenue from one department to another as an expense. So that is essentially reflective of the fact that the visitor paid parking, as reported in the budget presentation, is assisting in the carrying cost of the debt payments on the activity center renovation project, as well as providing an operating subsidy to the transit service.
And what would those line items add up to?
Your Worship, I think the question the delegation is asking is how much is left over from visitor paid parking?
Yeah, and the net from just the parking spot, and then you obviously use the money for something.
So the municipality is expecting to make, after paying bank charges and service charges, the provider in the budget document, $1 million, 1.03. So it shows as an expense for paid parking because it gets parceled out to other parts of the budget to subsidize things so taxpayers don't have to pay it.
So it sounds like we could possibly bring this down a bit because if my math is correct, at $10 million budget, that's 10%. Right? So if we increased it by 6 months, we're likely to do better. We'll have more. Obviously.
Yes, if we charge for parking year round, it wouldn't be double because we don't have the visitation, but there would be more and it would subsidize taxes. No question about it. But what that amount would be, not entirely sure. Councillor Melvin passed a motion, made a motion a week ago to in fact look at increasing revenue from paid parking. We will deal with that later this afternoon. Councillor Bowen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you very much, Mr. Day. I think just to reiterate some of what the mayor said, being part of that decision-making process, as you pointed out, a lot of that was contemplation on, the pressure on parking at certain times and, when would be the best time to actually exercise this. And we did talk about going full year, and we did talk about, going for partial year. And as the mayor said, there was some sentiment that we would be scaring away some visitation in the winter time when it's slower and when there's an abundant amount of parking in the community. Why charge for the few spots that are going to be used for a short amount of time? However, when it comes to looking at the potential revenues, I think we also discussed that on average in the community, from our understanding, and I don't want to put this as a hard number, but around 70% of business, or for many businesses, 70% of revenues come between the beginning of May and the end of October. Some 75, some 100, depends on what kind of industry you're in, right? But overall, around 70 was the number. And so that kind of takes into consideration some of that kind of bubble effect on when's the right time to actually, try to get some revenue from visitors in the community, because it's 32% of our budget goes directly towards tourism costs in our community, or in directly related or indirectly related. So, factoring that in as well, we've heard from other people what kind of pressure can we keep putting on businesses and the residents. So it's just a matter of, we're going to fine tune this. We're not going to get it right every single time. If there is an opportunity to increase this. I think maybe one of your questions too was how much is going towards the arena and how much is going to transit. How much of that money did you get that answered? Like from the $1 million, was that one of the questions?
No,
like where's that $1 million?
No, I mean, I think it's being used for general purposes. I was more interested in what was the net. And then why would we not continue that program? Because there's multiple factors for why that part would make sense. But when I go to Edmonton and it's quiet, I still pay subscription. Doesn't matter what month it is. So I think just was asking the question more because I know we have limited revenue streams as a community that ties into the visitor economy. And this is one of them that does. So to not fully utilize it and then ask another level of government for more tools might seem like we're not fully utilizing the tools in our war chest at this particular time, when it would seem that we need some help. Anyway, thank you for entertaining me.
Thank you, Mr. David. Deputy Mayor Paul.
Thank you. I just want to also thank you, Mr. Dave, for your question. I'm happy to know there's appetite for year-round paid parking. It is the only way visitors directly pay us. So thank you.
Are there others who wish to address council? I will say for the record that there are two out there and we received emails from you. And we thank you for the succinct nature of those emails, Ms. English and Ms. Cole. So thank you for that. I acknowledge that we have received those emails and those will be part of the input that we consider as we debate later this afternoon. I don't want to deprive anybody of an opportunity, but we do have an agenda to get to. So going once, going twice, replicating Mr. Mills from last Friday night to run an auction. All right, I will say that we have reached the end of agenda item, whatever it was, 4, I think, delegations. Agenda item 5, delegations. And I will move council now to new business. We begin with agenda item 6.1, land acknowledgement policy.
Your Worship, I was here last week and Director Reed wasn't, but so I'll just speak to all of the new business items to reference that they were all at committee last week. And so council's obviously had some discussion. Specifically on item 6.1, the land acknowledgement policy comes as a request of council to update that policy. The draft that's in the agenda package here reflects the recommendations and changes that were brought forward by council at the committee meeting, and the policy is here for council's approval. Sorry, consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Subject to any questions councillors may have of administration, is there a councillor prepared to make a motion to adopt the revised land acknowledgement policy as presented? Deputy Mayor Hall.
I would make that motion if there wasn't any comments from council. I didn't see hands up. I'm really proud of the work we've been doing with truth and reconciliation. I'm really happy to make a motion that we adopt the revised land acknowledgement policy.
Thank you for that motion, Deputy Mayor Hall. Is there any debate? Seeing nothing, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you all. Mr. Given, agenda item 6.2.
Your Worship, again, similarly brief. 6.2 is the revisions to the Community and Economic Development Fund policy. This grant fund has been around for a while in the municipality. Council asked for a review. That review was brought forward to the last committee meeting. There's some significant discussion, particularly around who may qualify to apply for the fund. The draft policy in front of you reflects the changes brought forward by the committee, and really the intent, I think that sort of the action of the changes is to make it more broadly applicable and allow more types of entities to qualify to apply for the fund. It does not change the overall amount of the fund, but merely opens it up so that more Jasper entities could apply.
Thank you for that. Mr. Given, again, if there are questions of administration, we would entertain those now. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion. Councillor Demona.
Well, I wanted to make a comment that, I appreciate the work that we did behind that with the information that administration brought forward in an effort to make things a little bit more accessible by agencies or entities in the community to come to council. I hate to use the term red tape reduction, but it did take away a few unnecessary steps in wording and such, and made this a little bit more qualifiable for people to access funds. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will make that motion to adopt the revised Community and Economic Development Fund policy.
Thank you for the motion, Councillor Melnick. Is there any debate? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for that. Agenda item 6.3, Mr. Given.
Your Worship, again, brief because this was previously at committee. You'll see the revised terms of reference for the Jasper-Hakone Committee. Council policy directs the municipality should have a committee for twinning cities relationships. The council is asked to refocus that committee more exclusively on the Jasper-Hakone relationship. The committee here sets up the roles, the terms of reference set up the roles and responsibilities of the committee, as well as the potential membership. And just how the committee would operate, again, reflective of the changes and direction at committee of the whole meeting.
Again, thank you for that, Mr. Given. Are there any questions of administration from councillors? Councillor Waxer.
Excuse me, under 2.2, I'm wondering if that piece is necessary, since there are no externally appointed members of the committee. It seems I found it confusing to read.
Yeah.
Councillor Tomoto?
Yeah, I get that because we have an organization meeting and that's members with the capital F, so that means us.
The one difference is the 2-year term potential. But otherwise, they would be appointed at the organizational committee. Well, if it's a concern, somebody can make a motion to amend the proposed terms of reference.
I'm just wondering, I haven't sat on all the committees. However, are there some where we do get appointed for a multi-year? Sure.
I don't think so.
And I think the reason behind this initially was for continuity. I'm not sure. Just asking questions. Okay.
Councillor Foster.
That, what 2.2 looks to me like it might have come from a different committee terms of reference, because if the only members are councillors, then they're appointed by the mayor at the organizational meeting, and the municipal council doesn't decide for terms. So I think it may have just been a holdover from another terms of reference.
Okay, so you want to remove that?
Your worship, if I may.
It appears that perhaps the Director of Protection of Legislative Services wishes to speak to the matter. But
Your worship, I'm gonna hold rank. You're exactly right. If council thinks that that's extraneous, by all means, a simple motion to amend the bylaw to remove 2.2 would close the matter. It may be left over from a previous template. It may also be a reflection that there was a consideration of what time of external members, which then would have needed that. So I think simple motion to amend, and then a motion to pass as amended would deal with it. I'm not sure if there's any explanation beyond that required.
I make a motion that we amend the Jasper-Hakone Committee terms of reference by removing the 2.2.
Thank you for that. Councillor Waxer, is there any debate? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And might I then impose upon a councillor to make a motion that council approve the Jasper-Hakone Committee terms of reference as amended? Councillor Waxer?
That council approve the Jasper-Hakone terms of reference as amended.
Thank you for that motion. Is there any debate? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Agenda item 6.4, Tourism Jasper Destination Stewardship Plan. Again, to save you the trouble, Mr. Given, that was presented to committee of the whole, where there was a recommendation from committee to council to endorse that stewardship plan. And at the same time, and when I now consider it perhaps prematurely, to direct administration to take steps for implementation, that direction came before council actually approved the plan based on the recommendation. We could, I think, adopt the same direction at this time. So I would suggest the council is prepared to approve the Tourism Jasper Destination Plan. We also confirm our direction to administration to take steps where appropriate towards implementation. Councillor Demota?
Thank you. And that's where I was kind of going with the line of questioning here, because I was prepared to make the motion. However, I was wondering if endorse was, I know we discussed it briefly last week, but is that the full intention, or do we want to adopt and endorse, or vice versa? What would the further recommendation be, or if that's adequate for administration?
Your worship, to speak to that, so both these plans are similar in nature. The municipality of Jasper was a funder of the plans, although the planning was done by other organizations who were participant in those exercises. So we're not necessarily the owners of the plan per se. We're supporters, funders, and some of the ideas in the plan or recommendations obviously implicate the municipality. So I think endorse is probably, endorse or accept. It's like an acknowledgement that, hey, this plan exists and we believe that it's good. Then I think the second part was really about what actions the municipality might take, if any, to support the recommendations of the plan. So I think the idea of council acknowledging that the plan has been received, and so it sort of ties off the municipality's role as a participant in the funder. The second part of direction to administration is to for the municipality to consider what actions, if anything, arises coming out of the plan. And at the committee level, the direction to administration was to review the plan and identify opportunities for the municipality to participate in implementation and return to a future committee level. So, Your Worship, I think that direction to administration, it doesn't tell administration to do anything other than research and come back to committee with a review, essentially. So I don't know that that's needed to be done again by council, because you're not expending any funds, you're directing administrative resources.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. I'm content with that. And after much discussion, I thought at committee of the whole, we settled on the word endorse, which is in the motion. And I think that was the request from Tourism Jasper, that we endorsed the plan.
Yeah. Also heard receive and accept in there too. So if endorse all encompasses that, then that's fine. And we understand the nuance and the intent of the motion, and I don't mind presenting it that way, unless somebody else wants to. I move the council endorse the Tourism Jasper Destination Stewardship Plan.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Demota. Is there any debate? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you all. I see in the gallery, Mr. Jackson, thank you again for your work in developing that plan and getting it to council. Much appreciated. Agenda item 6.5, Jasper Labor Market Study, again presented to council by the Jasper Education and Employment Center at our last committee of the whole meeting, coming to council with a recommendation from committee that council endorse that Jasper Labor Market Study. Are there any questions for administration with respect to the endorsement of that study? And if not, I would invite a motion. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I make the motion that council endorse the Jasper Labor Market Study.
Thank you for that, Councillor Melnick. Is there any debate? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We are now at agenda item 6.6, the 2024-2026 operating and 2024-2028 capital budget discussion. I am going to exercise the prerogative of the chair and call a short recess, because I expect this will be the last time we get a break for a while. So I will call a comfort break now for council and members of the gallery, and we will reconvene very shortly at 3:45. Or pardon me, that's 2:45. Thank you. I will call us back into session. I wonder whether we can confirm there she is. Councillor Keller is back with us. We are at agenda item 6.6. The operating and capital budgets. Mr. Gibbon.
Your worship, in contrast to the last agenda items, I'll take a little bit longer to introduce this one. I appreciate that this is the one that is of most interest and the most weight for council to deal with today. So in front of you, you have recommendation that council approve the 2024 and 2026 operating budget as presented, and the council approve the 2024 to 2028 capital budget as presented. The administration has also provided alternatives that council amend the operating or capital budgets as desired and then approve them. As background, on November 14th, council started the budget process in the public forum by receiving requests for funding from external groups. And then the process continued on November 21st and 22nd, where council reviewed a proposed budget that contained a $1.3 million year-over-year increase in net tax for a 2024 total net tax requirement of $11.555 million to fund municipal services. As council and the community heard at the time, there are some major factors placing pressure on the 2024 operating budget. These include tax-funded debt repayment costs for the recreation facility renovation. Those costs are up $593,000 over 2023. Regular salary progressions and the full year costs of 2023 approved positions. That totals $412,000 of increase over 2023. And full year transit operating costs, that is $245,000 in net municipal costs, as well as increased energy costs of $154,000. 2024 capital budget as presented totals approximately $41 million, 54% of which is funded from outside sources, 30% from debt, and 10% from reserves. Final 5% reflects unfunded projects that would not go forward in 2024. Through the course of discussion on the 21st and 22nd, council, acting as committee of the whole, made a variety of amendments to the budget and directed administration to bring forward items, to incorporate items into the budget for council's review here today. After those changes, the net tax requisition increased to $1.547 million. A couple of those changes were around the revenue side. Council directed administration to increase the forecast paid parking revenue by an additional $150,000. So that brought the forecast from $1 million up to the 1.15 that I referenced earlier during the delegations. And council also requested some additional information, specifically related to the impact of a tax increase and historic tax increases. I'll speak to those in just a second as well. So as amended by committee, the budget does show that $1.5 million net tax increase over 2023. This includes additions such as community group funding, additional position requests, and that increase of $150,000 paid parking revenue. Compared to the 2023 budget, this represents a year-over-year increase in net tax envelope of 15.16%. Since council's direction, the administration has had an opportunity to incorporate that direction and the amendments and to reevaluate the budget with an intent to incorporate any new information since early fall. And we've also taken the opportunity to identify additional opportunities for cost savings or revenue. And I can speak to those. We have an attachment to the documents as well. First, we'll start with the council directed information requests. Council requested information on the growth in taxes, specifically over the past 3 years. So for the 2021, 22, and 23 years, the total net tax increases have been as follows: 14.64%, 13.64%, and 11.89%. In the report, administration provided additional context, because while there have been successive increases over the past number of years, as council will see over the past 10 years, taxes decreased consecutively from 2014 to the low of 2020. So actual taxes paid declined over that time. And that's contrasted with what would have happened had taxes increased by an average of 2% per year over that same decade. Under the proposed budget as amended by council previously, the 2024 proposal would still see properties pay less municipal tax than they would have had the annual average increase been 2% over that same decade. And this reflects growth in the property tax base. So the addition of new properties, probably the most obvious example that would be clear to everyone is the conversion of former gas station site into a new hotel property. So that's a net new property that is essentially spreading the tax burden across more properties. And while that's the largest and most obvious one, there are also other smaller subdivisions that happen where an older home is replaced by two newer homes. And those newer homes are obviously at a higher property value and again, serve to spread the tax burden across a larger base. The second information request from council was the impact of the tax increase on a home valued at $500,000 and a commercial property valued at $500,000. Administration's provided a table in the report that covers that. The annual increase on a $500,000 residential property would be an estimated $195 a year, or $16 a month. And on a $500,000 commercial property, the annual increase would be $972 or $81 a month. Again, administration believes that additional context is needed. People often have questions about the valuation of properties in Jasper. I think we recognize that the assessed values of properties tend to be quite high. So administration has attached Appendix 1 to the report, which provides a broader view of what increase would result for different property values, as well as how much of our tax base, how many properties are of different sort of values. As council will see in the report, 57% of residential properties are valued at $800,000 or less. Those are properties that would see approximately a $25.95 per month increase or less. On the commercial side, approximately 50% of the properties in the municipality, commercial properties in the municipality, are valued at $1 million or less. Those properties would see an increase of $162 per month or less. Again, that information is in the report, which is available to the public. And I think it demonstrates that there is a significant amount of nuance required when looking at the property tax increase and the impact on any individual property. Administration would also offer some qualifiers here for those doing the math. The municipality doesn't have just commercial and residential tax rates. We have urban commercial tax rates and rural commercial tax rates and urban residential tax rates and rural residential tax rates. And we also have Lake Edith tax rates. So all told, the discussion around ratio is not quite as simple as 5 to 1. And the numbers that are presented here in terms of the impact, please keep in mind that those are based on 2022 assessed values. They may not be reflective, and the actual tax increase that any individual property might see is also impacted by the change in the assessment of that property as compared to like properties. So if one residential property goes up in value according to the market, while some other residential property goes down or holds its value at a certain level compared to the market, then their share of the tax burden would change. So the numbers that administration presents here may not translate straight across, but they should be used as being indicative of what the scale is. We've also provided, again, to enable residents and businesses to be able to do a bit more accurate calculation on their own circumstance, the amount of increase per $100,000 in assessed value. So there is an opportunity for anybody who doesn't fit into those numbers of 500,000 or on commercial or residential to take their past assessed value and multiply it by the numbers that are in the report here to find what their impact would be. So as I said, 57% of residential properties would see a monthly property tax increase of $25.95. Another example would be a property with a $300,000 value, similar to our properties in the co-ops that moves different than the market. They would see an increase of approximately $9.73 per month. At the other end of the scale, we do have some very valuable residential properties. 9% of our residential properties are valued at $1.2 million or more. And even though that 9% is a small part of the total, there's still a wide variety of property values in that 9%. For example, at the very top end, we would see a multifamily apartment complex with 229 units for a total assessed value of $38.5 million. So you can imagine that the request for information of what's the impact on a $500,000 property might not be reflective on a property like that. For that type of large multifamily property, it would see a total monthly increase of approximately $1,251, which works out to about $5.46 a unit per month. On a smaller multifamily apartment with 8 units, we have at least one on the tax roll. Its total value is $1.4 million. That property would see an increase of $45.71 a month, or in the equivalent of $5.71 per unit. So that gives you a little bit more context, again, recognizing that the non-residential class has a whole bunch of different types of property. But you can see that, particularly with respect to multifamily, that range of $5.50 to just under $6 is probably the likely impact per unit for any of the multifamily properties. Council also asked for information on the commercial side, and we presented that at $972 for a $500,000 value property. But again, there's a really wide variety within the commercial tax base. As I said before, 50% of commercial properties are valued at $1 million or less, and that's the group that would see that increase of $162. While a $500,000 property would see a smaller increase of $81 per month. Looking at the other end of the scale, about 15% of commercial properties are assessed at a value of $5 million or more. An example in that higher group would be a hotel property with 80 units and a total value of $12.1 million. The total cost of the increase would be $1,960, or roughly $245 per month per unit in that property. So that is the council information requests. And your worship, I appreciate it maybe going quickly, but I'm happy to go through the report and come back to answer any questions council might have. I just want to provide an orientation to the information that's here, and we can certainly have some discussion. The other section that administration has been able to add since the council committee of the whole discussion, administration obviously has worked to incorporate the changes directed by council. And we've also had the opportunity to identify some additional opportunities for cost savings or revenue increases. These are in Appendix 2 in the public agenda. And generally these ideas arise in response to the discussion at the budget meetings, and in some cases from additional information that has come to administration's attention since the draft budget was developed. And as council knows, that process really does start early summer, continues on, and is essentially fixed by very early fall. And so there is some new information that administration was able to bring forward. In the table, administration has attempted to describe each of the items, as well as any associated risks, service impacts, or additional considerations. And should council choose, you may make motions on any of these items to further amend the budget to incorporate them, and then to make a final motion to approve the 2024 operating capital budgets as amended. I'll just highlight briefly, again, worship, happy to answer questions about them or to be assisted by the directors about any of the impacts. We have a list of items here. The first is expense reduction. administration has identified that based on the sort of low volume of snow this year and forecasts for next year, as well as the improvements in our service over the last number of years by bringing a number of services in-house, we could reduce our contracted services in the winter roads and walks, winter roads, walks and lights category by by $40,000. If there's a excessively large snowfall in the latter half of this winter or the early part of next winter, it may cause us to have to rely on reserves if we have to pull in extra contracted services. But again, that's a savings that's all has an opportunity to have a direct impact on the net tax requisition. Administration brought forward a pause in the maintenance of memorial benches. Our budget, as I think council discussed, does contain a capital item of $30,000 per year for new memorial benches. On our operational side, we do have an annual expense of maintaining memorial benches that are already in place. So although people establishing a memorial bench, believe, do it in good conscience and wishing to leave a legacy, that legacy does have an ongoing maintenance cost to the tune of $15,918 per year. So if council wish to pause the maintenance on the memorial benches for a period while retaining the ongoing capital purchase, so we could essentially replace the worst benches with new ones because we have money in the capital budget already, that would save just under $16,000 in 2024. There's a revenue increase opportunity in the wildflowers daycare. The administration has received additional information about what their expected funding from the government of Alberta and Alberta Education would be. We don't see that there would be any service impacts to increasing revenue in this area because it would be is more a reflection of expected revenue from an outside funder. Again, to be clear, this is not from the rates that would be paid for by users of that service, but administration believes that this is more reflective of what is likely actual revenue, and that's $17,897 of revenue increase. The next line item is also a revenue increase, but it is associated with a newly proposed position. So council did request administration to bring forward the culture and rec programming position. Administration at the time hadn't associated any revenue with that. As council member, the discussion was largely focused on increasing the use of our facilities and any revenue from additional rentals. We've had a discussion about the viability of creating an expectation that this position would generate new programming revenue, essentially fees for people to attend events or camps. Administration would suggest that a reasonable target in the first year of operation of this position might be $6,000. Again, this would be net new revenue that would be in addition to any revenue that might come from increased rental of municipal facilities. Council will remember that when the municipality discontinued our summer camp programming, there was a small revenue loss. This begins to rebuild that revenue. Although there would not be any intent to doing hosting or accommodation of municipal facilities in terms of what that service. The next line item is also a revenue increase. This is a change in expected revenue and staffing costs at out of school care. This more closely reflects what we saw through the course of 2023 in terms of utilization. And so administration advises that the budget could be amended to reflect additional $14,357 in revenue. Again, as the year has gone through, we're able to sort of more closely see what the actuals have been in utilization. Of course, if revenue doesn't meet expectations, then that would be at the end of the year, we may need to draw on reserves. The next item is an expense reduction. There's an opportunity to reduce contracted expenses in the community development area. And we'll just make the distinction. This is what we sometimes refer to as mini CD or mini community development, not the overall global area, but the smaller department within. This would be essentially a delay of a service improvement. The budget did contain $15,000 intended to support honorariums and expenses related to intended engagement with community partners. There are often cost to bring community partners and honorariums they're paid for their participation in cultural events in Jasper. And like we would with any other consultant that's passing on learning and knowledge to municipality, we have an amount available to that. If this amount wasn't included in the budget, this amount is currently included in the budget. If it was removed, that would simply limit our ability to bring in those types of community partners for educational programming or other relationship building programming. Only two more on the tax envelope side. Another revenue increase. Council has already directed a revenue increase in visitor paid parking, and that is reflected in the amended budget that's in front of you. With the conclusion of the program and more of the data being known, and we are still receiving payments from some of the partners, particularly the hotel properties that do block purchases of parking. But as more about the 2023 year and as clear, administration could recommend that revenue expectation could be increased to a total of 1.25 million. So essentially $100,000 more than council had increased it by. This would require likely some minor modifications to the program parameters, either the rate or the start of the season, number of spaces. Administration hadn't expected or hadn't accounted for major changes. So these would be likely minor incremental changes to the program. It's important to note that $100,000 increase in expected revenue really only provides a net tax reduction of $80,000 because there are program fees, bank charges, service fees with the provider that are paid up first before the municipality gets to claim any of that revenue. So you'll see that that's reflected as an $80,000 net tax. And the final one is one where I may end up relying on Director Melnichuk as well, because if any of those were, I'm going to assume that all of those were crystal clear. This one may not be as clear as even any of the rest of those. There is an opportunity to apply previous years' accumulated municipal overlay. This would have no service level impact, and it would not directly impact the 2024 net tax requisition that would show in the budget. It would be a reduction that would be applied at the mill rate setting time. So the impact of that would be $147,000. But council, if you chose to direct administration to apply that, you wouldn't see a reduction in the net tax. It would be taken off when the mill rate is applied. And what this relates to is in our budget process, the administration has to make some estimations of the value of all of our properties in the community. And we do that with the benefit of our municipal assessor. Administration also has to account for the fact that property owners have the right to appeal their property value assessment. And when we're setting our budget, we have to make some estimation of how many of those appeals will be successful and how much our total assessment will decline. There are years where we've made a estimate of how much we would lose in assessment. That means that we have a mill rate that is slightly higher to be able to make up for that expected loss. And then when the appeals are heard and that process goes through, we may not lose as much assessment as necessary. And so that means that our slightly higher mill rate would have collected slightly more than needed. But this is all pretty typical for municipalities just in terms of the way that process goes. In terms of when we have to set our budget, when the mill rate is set, and when the assessment appeals process happens. This is an accumulated surplus over a number of years. And so that's something that could be applied. Again, it won't change the net tax requisition. So just, with council's doing the math, I'm sure everybody has this idea of $1.5 million in net tax requisition. Choosing to apply this won't change that number, but it will reduce the amount of dollars that we collect from the tax base when we go to set the mill rate. So, council, that's the tax envelope items. Again, the directors and I are here to answer any questions or specifics about that. There is one utility item, and that is increasing our revenue forecast for bulk water sales. As council knows, we have the new sandy dump and bulk water station currently under construction. We're going to be moving into the electronic components inside that allow us to bill for bulk water. And for the sandy dump administration, based on a very high level estimation, our current system for selling bulk water is essentially a notebook that people write down the volume of water that they filled, and then we charge them based on that. So it is not exactly an honor system, but pretty close. This will be a system that is mechanically operated, credit card required, all those sorts of things. Administration estimates that it would be reasonable to include an additional $100,000 in revenue as a result from that. And that could be added to the utility revenue line, which would reduce the overall requirement for any change in levies, utility levies. So, Your Worship, I appreciate that that's a lot of information. I appreciate that I went through it quite quickly, but I also appreciate that council likely wants to get into discussion, debate, and questions. And so I will turn it back to you for any questions that myself or the admin team can answer for you.
Thank you for that introduction, Mr. Given. Are there questions for Mr. Given or administration relating to the information provided? Councillor Waxer.
Through you, Mayor Ireland, to Director Reid, if you could potentially give a little bit of background on the reduction, the 15,000, and which community partners this would affect, and if it is the full budget or if it's just a reduction in the budget.
Through to Councillor Waxer, this is specifically a new ask to continue along the work, especially of truth and reconciliation with the Indigenous partners. We have not included this amount in the past, and for us to continue the work we're doing, it does require bringing the partners here to have the learnings and teachings, as CAO Given indicated. To bring those learnings to us does require payment. So that's what that amount directly relates to.
Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Thank you. The last part of my question was, is that an elimination of that from the budget, or is there some budget left?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Waxer, my apologies. That is the entire amount that we have included in the budget.
Just as I wait for other questions, Mr. Given, I just want to return to the request for decision. One comment and one question. Firstly, you spoke about the example of a hotel property complex with 80 units and a value of 12.1 million. And I just want to confirm that there is a decimal misplaced, and that would not be $245 per unit, but $24.50.
Your Worship, yes, that's correct. And thank you for highlighting that. The other thing that I think I got while I was running through everything was another error. There's a total incorrect in the value in Appendix 2. The tax funded items do not add up to a total of 555,000. They add up to 336,172. So if you added up all those suggestions, that line is incorrect, and that's a reflection that we were searching to see where we could find. There was also an over levy in the education requisition of approximately $200,000. But by law, we have to retain that to apply to other future provincial education requisitions. So we can't, apply to the municipal side. But it would ultimately have the impact of reducing any future increase in the provincial education requisition.
Thank you for that. I just had one question, again, about the presentation. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I just have a concern. I'm one of those guys that comes in handy in a restaurant when there's a pilot. Like not lit and I smell some chemical in the air and I'm not sure if it's affecting me at all, but I'm wondering if there's something going on elsewhere in the building because we have our ventilation closed off. Other people are wearing masks, some were painting something or whatever, and that might be affecting the room. If no one else smells it, then it could be just me. I thought I was having a stroke earlier today because I thought I smelled something standing here. I'm just wondering if that can. Okay.
I'll go on a quest, just in case.
Appropriate for our director of ethics here. This is the one protected.
Sorry, I don't want to cause alarm.
Mr. Given, appendix 1 that has been provided. I was surprised, and I'd expect that others would be surprised, that there could be 68 commercial properties valued at less than $500,000. Can you explain how that works? It just seems surprising that would be.
Thank you for the question, Worship. That would be mostly comprised of the co-op housing as well as some of the older commercial, sorry, under 500,000. And sorry, that is not the right answer. I would have to look up the properties associated with that one, sorry.
And I wondered whether it might be related to the apportionment of commercial to homeowners who have private home accommodation, but then 68 seemed like a low number.
Yes, that is a really good idea. It would be a portion of that. I don't think it would be all of it, but it would be some of that. Definitely.
Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. My question may have been answered earlier with you, CEO Given, but why would taxes go down from 2014 to 2019? I understand 2020, but that period leading up, like what would be the reasons for that?
Your Worship, if I might be able to answer to Deputy Hall. Yeah, so during that time, what occurred is the taxation was going up, but the assessment was growing not in growth of market, but in growth of additional structures. So then the assessed value spreads, and then the budget spreads over a greater amount of properties, which then reduces the amount of taxation that's going to each one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Councillor DeVoe, and then Councillor Waxer.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad because it's on the same vein. I appreciate you acknowledging me through you, sir, to administration. Just the growth in taxes, when we talked about that, I see that on that graph, it's based on a $700,000 residential unit for that particular graph. And that's assuming that there's a common ratio built in from the difference between what a $700,000 resident was in 2014 and to what it will be next year. When the initial numbers in the second sentence there were attributed to 14.64%, the 13.64, and the 11.89, that's an overall budget increase. And to me, when I was looking at the residential aspect of it, it kind of makes it look like there wasn't an increase, but year after year, we did experience an incremental increase in the actual budget in similar lines, whether it was like 8%, 7%, 10%, it was going up. This is reflecting an average $700,000 home, and with a change in the actual amount of housing that was in the community at the time. So to me, it doesn't look like we're comparing apples to apples in the comparison. Thank you.
Your Worship,
Councillor Moda is correct. The first number, the historic tax increases, are the percent increases in net tax requisition, which is also not the same as the budget increase or budget change. Because our budget has funding sources other than tax. And so from year to year, if we get additional grants for operating, our budget may increase or decrease based, reflective of that. And so the intent of the second chart is to show the actual amount of dollars that would be paid by, say, fictional property, right? Because there's very few properties that are exactly the average, but a $700,000 property, if its value was relatively constant. As I've mentioned before, the challenge is that obviously over time, property values do increase. The municipality, though, does control for that in our mill rate. We don't get extra money when the overall value of all the stuff in Jasper goes up. What does happen, though, and what makes it difficult to assess something like this on a straight line, and that's what I presented here, a straight line, $700,000. It was only worth $700,000 for 10 years straight. And I think we can all appreciate that that's not likely, although I would advocate it. But it does demonstrate that the amount of dollars paid, on that type of property had been declining. This does apply pretty closely to some of the properties where the value of the property doesn't move along with the market at the same pace. And so, there are a significant number of properties that would have much more stable valuations. They would have seen something like this, but for everybody else, a 1954 residential property that's unimproved may not increase in value as fast as a new, 2019 new build. The appreciation, they may grow at different rates. And so it is difficult to measure. And so I, certainly want to provide a caveat that this should be seen as indicative and an attempt to reflect the sort of actual rate, the actual amount of dollars that are being paid if all those other things are held constant. Because for administration to be able to say, okay, well, a $700,000 property, well, it's a $700,000 property that was worth $750 last year, and it's gone down to 700. That maybe seems improbable, but relative to other properties, it may not be increasing as fast as others. So the best way to control for that is to say, okay, over that longer stretch of time, the property's value was constant, what would it have paid in property tax dollars? And that's what that chart is reflective of. But you're correct that the increase in net tax is not the same as the amount of dollars paid.
Councillor Waxman, I'm sorry, Councillor Moda, did you?
No, and I appreciate that, and it's not that I'm calling administration out or anything, it's just more for clarity and for the viewers and people at home, they're trying to handle the information here. I do have other questions that are similarly based, but I have no problem waiting. Thank you.
Councillor Waxman.
Co-op housing is a unique or special model of housing, and where the value is arrived at differently. Is the taxation model for co-op housing based on a provincial taxation model, or is it developed especially here in Jasper?
Your worship, for Councillor Waxer. So no, the uniqueness about the co-op models is really about how the value and the assessed value of the property moves compared to the rest of the market. And that doesn't have any bearing on how the municipality applies the tax rate for the application of the municipal mill rate. It is a residential property, an urban residential property, and it gets the same residential tax rate as a as any other general property. So some other non-co-op housing in the urban setting would receive the same mill rate applied. It's just that the value of a co-op property according to the market, is limited. I won't say capped because I believe that there is inflation, but that it doesn't grow at the same pace as the rest of the market. And so, and I don't know this for a fact, but I believe some of our co-op properties may be in that value of approximately $300,000. And I think it would be fair to say if they were for sale on the open market, they would probably sell for more, at regular market rates. And so the co-op model restrains the growth in market value. It doesn't, and our mill rate is applied to that capped assessed value. That makes sense. And capped is a bit extreme. I believe they do grow, but it's just at a slower rate.
Go ahead, Councillor Roger.
Sorry, and that would be the same, it would be the same all around the province on LNO.
Sorry, yes, Councillor Waxer. So wherever co-op housing exists, it would be applied exactly the same.
Councillor Order.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to stick to that theme because I'm not going to go back to the other one until we get back there. But because I do live in one of those types of condo style that comes at a reduced assessment. And one of the personal issues I have is the inequity in the community with the condominiums that are assessed at market value. And the people that are living in those residences are getting services provided by the municipality at a different rate than people that are in co-op because it's based on assessment. So whatever I'm paying for water, sewer, and garbage may be different than somebody in Stone Mountain, for an example, to my knowledge. Correct?
Councillor Devoda, Your Worship, if I may, Councillor Devoda, you said water, sewer, and garbage, which would be utility based. The utilities being, so those would actually be equal, but for other municipal services like snow removal and recreation facilities. So yeah, but Stone Mountain is a similar sort of higher density condo style development, but that is market based. And so those properties make up a larger share of our overall residential assessment base. And they would pay more dollars. They pay the same rate as a co-op, but by virtue of their higher value, they would contribute more dollars.
Right. I apologize. Thanks for clarifying the utilities aspect. So let's just use the street for an example. The street in front of my place compared to the street in front of somebody else's place doesn't cost less to clean or maintain, or so is there a precedent in another community where there is the ability, and I know I'm shooting myself in the foot as well as my neighbors by asking this question, but I mean I'm talking about finding money for the budget and when there's inequities, because in essence, if my resident was at market value, I would be contributing differently. I'm just solely looking at my perspective, and I'm not saying a workaround, but I mean, is there a way to maybe equalize those payments?
Your Worship, for Councillor Devoda, so although additional research would be required, I am aware that it is possible for municipalities to establish different mill rates for different types of residential properties. The community that I came from, we probably still have on the books a other residential mill rate. In that case, other residential was applied to apartment complexes or multifamily. I think under the theory that they were closer to commercial developments. The justification of philosophy aside, the fact was that there was a residential mill rate and a other residential mill rate, and they were different. So without having done the additional research, I would imagine that you could apply a similar tool to have a higher mill rate on those properties that do not move along with the market to ensure that they are contributing on an equitable level to properties that are moving with the market. That's something that would take additional research, but I would imagine we have the legislative authority to do.
Well, that's good news because I was under the impression that we were, and not to alarm any, to set off any alarms, but some people have sidewalks and some don't too, so that's been an argument in the past. So I just thought I'd bring that to light because we are talking about looking for savings, and I think that's important.
I appreciate the discussion. And I would be happy to engage in it. I think that it goes to the inequity of the property tax system overall, which I perhaps ranted about a week or so ago. So for comparison, I'm glad, Councillor Demota, that you brought it up. I would assume that you and your wife consume municipal services about the same as myself and my wife, but we don't pay anywhere near the same for it.
That's the point.
That is a question, I think, for allocation and tax rate question when the time comes, as I expressed to President Mills of the Chamber earlier. It's related. It's not today's discussion, but it's an important discussion, unless we can turn it into a revenue issue now, but I don't think that we can. So I would invite council to keep in mind the allocation of the property tax bill, but today try and focus on the budget.
If I may, I appreciate that. And there is a method to my insanity here, if you'll allow me. So administration has presented appendix to revenue saving opportunities, and there is an amount in there on that side for $555,000 correct. And the total impact on the net tax items. So that $147,000 was discussed, and am I on the wrong page?
Your worship, Councillor Demota, that's the number that I had to own up to and not having updated. So that's that total potential net impact of all net tax items is $336,172. It just doesn't total all the items above because, as I mentioned before, there's the education requisition over levy that we removed.
And I remember that, and I was busy jotting other stuff down, and I didn't cross that out. I apologize, but that $147,000 was discussed there, and then that's what drew me to have that discussion. And that will take place at a later date. But if there's an opportunity to impact that number, that's why I was making that comment. We can't do that today. I totally understand that. But I didn't want to take us off topic.
Councillor Mellon.
I think where Councillor Demota is going is that $336,000, the potential impact on the next net tax items needs to be reduced by the 147 as well, because that 147 will only be applied once we get to the net tax increase. That 147 will be applied in the time when it's time to set the mill rates. So if I'm doing this correctly, if we had 1.5 round numbers as an increase, we would then could reduce that with all these savings by about 190,000 round figures, which would get us down to 1.31. And if that's the magic number, when we get time to go to the taxes, to the mill rate would be based on a number $147,000 less than that. So it'd be based on like 1,190,000, something like that. It's kind of a convoluted way to make a budget and to do the taxes, but so the two numbers to keep in mind is the 336, which really is about 190. And then the further application of the 147 when it comes down to doing it in February or March, I believe, for the mill rate. And we still have an opportunity for other budget reductions once these suggestions are applied to the 1.5.
Yes. And so when we're looking at that overall picture, we have information in front of us and, you know, at the patience of council and people viewing, people present here. When we're looking at that tax split, because we're on that topic, the information that's in front of us shows that 50% of our non-residential are going to be facing an increase just in taxes alone, in the net tax envelope by $2,000 a year, and then the other 50% between $6,000 and $10,000 a year. And to me, it depends also on how many sub-commercial units are in those buildings. Whether you own the building and it's one business operation, you might be fronting that 2,000 or that 6,000 by yourself, or if there's 2 or 3, you're going to split it up. But that's still a substantial increase for the amount of commercial properties and people that are subleasing off of these landlords. So I just like there's a lot of things to contemplate here, and you know we can look at a $700,000 fictional home in Jasper, and we did this last year, and the impact per house didn't look that big. But then when people are calling me up and saying my taxes went up $7,000 this year, how am I supposed to make that up, right? And they pass it along to their tenants. So that I'm just trying to keep that mindful when we're talking about the umbrella big picture here. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. On that straight conversation, is there a way to, these numbers you're giving us, the appendix ones, are based on the increase as it is at a 5-to-1 ratio, correct?
Your worship, for Councillor Hall, yes, that's correct.
Is there a way to get numbers so we don't change the mill rate, but we maybe split the increase evenly between commercial residents, or 2-to-1, or a different split?
So, your worship, for Deputy Mayor Hall, so just to be clear, you're talking about that the increase would be split at something other than a 5-to-1 ratio. So potentially with, yeah, obviously we can't go higher than 5-to-1, so the implication would be that it would shift more of the increase towards the residential base. Yes, that's possible. It would be a bit complicated to calculate. We wouldn't, we might be able to reflect something like that, but as I referenced before, we also have, we have 3 residential mill rates, and we have 2 commercial mill rates. And so the calculation on that would take some analysis for it to be really represented. But yes, it is possible for council to give direction that the 2024 net tax increase be split at some ratio other than 5-to-1. Okay.
I have a couple other questions that are related to that. Going back to Councillor Waxer's initial question to Director Reid about the contracted expenses, if we eliminated that, we would not be able to engage with the Indigenous partners for the year. Is that what I heard?
Your worship, through to Deputy Mayor Hall, that's correct.
Okay. And one other question that is, again, completely unrelated to those 2 questions, the increased revenue to paid parking, which I believe was a direction of $125,000 more. Did administration have to apply a rate per hour to figure out what we have to charge?
Your worship, I believe Director Malinchuk can speak to that.
Yes, your worship, through to Deputy Hall, it would work out to be about 50 cents additional to the, if you applied 50 cents additional per hour to the on-street and to the off-street parking lots, that would work out to the figure that's presented. So yeah, just a small increase there.
If I may get my own way a little bit, because I invited us to get back to budget, again, on allocation of burden. do we know yet what the relative assessments are for residential and non-residential? And do we know statistically how that relationship has changed over the years? So my understanding is that due to COVID and a hit in the economy, the assessments for non-residential properties have gone down, whereas residential properties have been at least stable and maybe increased a bit, shifting more of the burden to residential in any event. In all likelihood, over time, and appreciating that income-based assessment is 3 years average, not equal but split. Non-residential assessments are probably growing a bit, but do we know the relative apportionment now for the 2024 budget?
Your worship, we have very preliminary figures on that, but it is looking like the commercial is rebounding to 2019 figures. So they are coming back to pre-COVID financial statements for records. So this year we're seeing quite an increase in those properties, about close to 10%. And residential, we're looking potentially at the 4 to 7%, still in works, and it's not finalized as of yet, but we are seeing some increases, still the residential on the rise and commercial definitely on the rebound.
Thank you for that. More particularly and more related to the actual budget, Director Reid, you were asked about the revenue expectation from the new position, the programming position, and it's indicated now potentially $6,000. What is the cost to get that benefit? What is the cost of that position?
Your worship, the position as requested is $76,000. I can add that we also have $10,000 of contracted services that would be accommodated within that position. I did not give that to CAO given in time for the press here or the agenda. So that number would actually be a $16,000 change to that $76,000 request.
Thank you for that. Councillor Keller-Rampe, you've recently returned visually. I'm sure you've always been there. I haven't been able to see you, so I don't know whether that signifies that you had a question or not. But if you did, you're welcome.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor DeMora.
Just another comment, just because of something that Mr. Andrew had said earlier, and talking to some of the business owners and managers in the community, whether they're the landlords or owners of their particular businesses, Mr. Andrew's right. It's unfortunate that there isn't someone here that is described in the way that he said. But I think another thing to be cognizant of too is someone's fiscal year. There are a lot of businesses in the community, because they sit on community futures, that are still in the process of paying back their CERB loans, and there are triple RF, and that's going to have an impact on when they're able to recoup that. Mentioning that 70 to 75% of a lot of business in our community, the commercial aspect of it, gets recouped in those things. Like, a lot of people aren't going into the black until September sometimes. So when they're faced with doing that, increased utilities, because we're not even there yet, on top of the net tax envelope, there's a lot of stress there, and I can't emphasize that anymore. Like, we have to pay attention to that.
Councillor Melnick.
Your worship, with what was presented to us by administration, what would be the process? Would we adapt all of these into the budget and recalculate, I guess, what the next number would be before we continue to look at what that, eventual increase would be? Just by the numbers that we were talking about, if we applied the $189,000, then we're currently then speaking of a 1.358 increase over last year, $1,360,000, give or take. And then from there, we maybe can take a look at other things to get to a number we're comfortable with. In keeping with where Councillor Demoda was going, we need to get to an increase before we start divvying it up between residents and non-residential properties. And perhaps we should go through some of our previous motions and see if there's any other changes we might want to incorporate.
I would welcome that approach, Councillor Melnick. Although if there was a motion to perhaps adopt all of Appendix 2, I might be one who would call for division. But we could get started. Deputy Mayor Hall.
I have another question. I know maybe we can increase revenue. I'm curious if administration's ever looked into what we potentially bring in if we went year round. And I also think we could probably go $1 more instead of 50 cents.
Your worship, for Deputy Mayor Hall, in earlier consultation with the team here, administration, I think, had a preliminary look at going year round last year when we did the review of the program. And I think our advice would generally be that the returns from going year round are probably less than from an increase in the rate. So, and I don't know that these numbers still hold true, but I think a look at that issue last year forecast that the increased revenue from going year round might be $30,000, where as you heard, an additional $100,000 could, which ends up being 80 by the time you pay fees and charges on it, could be raised by, I think Director Armstrong said a 50-cent increase in the rate. So you can see that in terms of revenue bang the buck is actually focusing when there's the most utilization of the program. Having said that, that's only based on estimates with no data because we've never run paid parking, it's hard for us to be able to see exactly what that would return. But certainly if council wished to direct administration to increase paid parking revenue higher than the 1.25 million that's here, it would necessitate a change to the program beyond a 50-cent increase in the rate.
Councillor Demoda.
Because we're on that topic, in my notes, I've had some conversations in the community. I've talked to people who own businesses and our residents at the same time. Most of the time that goes hand in hand. And the conversation has been, well, why don't we go year round? So that was one of them that was addressed today. The other one is, well, commercial businesses in the downtown core, they have to pay, like a hotel has to pay for parking for their guests. Why aren't residents paying? That's just the question. And I was one of the people that supported and drove that we should make it free for the residents. And that was primarily based on my end, because it was a really hard change for a lot of people in the community. And I said, let's just do it for free for now and then see where we go. Again, we're not going to get it right. It's a tough question to bring up there, but Mr. Dave was right. He was on council at the time when we were asking for extra tools from the province. And they said, well, what are you doing to maximize all your revenue from the visitor? And when you bring that into question, it is bringing it in all year long, and it is, making residents pay. I'm just throwing it out there because we're looking for savings here, and we're looking at maximizing our revenues. So that's something to consider.
Well,
And if I may finish on that, before we go and make crazy decisions like that, we had the chamber in here that said that they'd like to have a little bit more of a conversation at that level. And if we're affecting businesses just by making, let's go and open this up, some mom and pop or even a bigger business might say, no, don't do that. You know, we had somebody speak to us that is making us explore that, but that might not be the answer. We might not need to do that in the winter.
There are three ways to increase revenue from parking. One is to change the rate, one is to extend the season, and one is to extend the spaces. What areas are currently available to expand paid parking that are not being used now?
Your worship, the administration could come forward with that. Certainly, as council knows, we're planning on bringing forward a year-end wrap-up report where it might be more appropriate to have a discussion with that, where we'd have maps in front of us. Certainly the high-profile locations are taken. Last year, council did expand the zone along Connaught to the east in some areas, and added a new paid parking zone in the parking lot, off-street parking along Connaught towards the east. There may be additional on-street that would be available there, but without having the benefit of having all those maps and the program data right in front of us, I suggest that we're not in a position to be able to answer what new areas. The core areas and the highest profile ones are already included. We'd start to get to items where there would be the return wouldn't be the same. Again, like the return on increasing the rate versus increasing the season, you're going to get bigger bang for your buck on the rate because the areas that are already covered are the highest utilized zones. So some zone that's only used 30% of the time won't return as much money at the same rate. So again, that type of program design is probably more of a implementation question than a revenue question as it gets to the budget. Because certainly there are a number of different ways to, council sets a revenue target, and administration could take away that revenue target and say, okay, what is our recommendation on the best way to achieve that revenue target?
Thank you for that. Councilor Watcher.
I apologize for being stuck on the one topic, but I was curious because in 2023 there were opportunities for engagement with the Indigenous populations. With the budget that those were funded through, be available to continue opportunities to engage in 2024.
Your worship, through to Councillor Waxer, possibly. We were able to fund those through creative funding, finding creative funding sources. What we are recognizing is that those sources are not guaranteed. And in fact, we were very lucky to get what we got in 2023. So again, we do not believe that those sources are available again. And that's why it's on this agenda or this budget.
Councilor Mellon.
And thank you, Your Worship. Just to advise, Councillor Keller-Ampey is losing signal again, so she may or may not be on the screen. So we'll keep an eye for that. But going back to how do we move forward with the Appendix 2 opportunities, and you suggested a separation into different motions. I think this is probably the first thing that we should address, is to get this off our plate and then concentrate on looking at different other aspects in the budget. And when you contemplated that separation, I'm assuming that the utility revenue increase would need to be separated from the other portions, since that would be as it relates to utilities, additional revenue, as opposed to reducing the net tax envelope.
that would be part of it. I think the utility discussion should be a separate motion, but even within the revenue or saving opportunities, there are quite a large number of items there, and everybody may not wish to vote yea or nay with respect to all of them. And I've heard some suggestions that there might be an opportunity to amend a couple of them. So I would, we could knock them off one by one, might be the more simple way to do it. Mr. Given, you went through the list, appreciated that. The very first one on the list, a savings of $40,000 by reduced winter contracted services. We heard from Mr. Finley about sanding. I take it that there are some standards that we need to maintain, and with the changing climate, I presume that icy roads, as we could have if it freezes tonight, are something that we have some responsibility for. I would just like to know that a $40,000 reduction in contracted services is not going to put people at risk of broken hips trying to walk their garbage to the corner of the street.
Your worship, I'll ask Director Greathead to speak to the specifics of that area. But I will just highlight that this is in contracted services. There would remain, I believe, Director Greathead, maybe you'll have to answer how much would remain in that line item. But this really is a reflection of prior year actuals. So we did a bit of a backwards look to say, okay, how much have we spent from this line over the past number of years? And the reflection of the fact that council did support the addition of additional heavy equipment operators over the last number of years. That is one of the things that's putting pressure on our budget. But it does mean that we can do more services in-house with our own forces rather than having to contract. Council, remember that a part of the proposal for the additional positions was a reduction in contracted services in 2023. This $40,000 is a recognition that we can further reduce contracted services as a result of the fact that we have more resources in-house because of those positions. So just to allay that concern, this would not be a straight across reduction in service. This would be a reduction in our capacity to bring in additional supports that where the municipality couldn't handle the demand on its own. Dr. Reid, anything else you want to add to that?
Thank you, CAO Given. Thank you, CAO Given. No, not really, other than I would like to address his worship's question about our increasing service level standards and what our base standards are. So really our policies are very, they're not defined as well as they could be or should be, or maybe they're actually, the ambiguity is helpful for us. It is a discretionary, there's a discretionary element in there, and when we roll the equipment out and when we spend the material, so that we respond to complaints that arise by from customers, as well as we go out daily and do a road patrol and just make sure that our roads are safe and respond to that. So if we notice that some of the intersections have gotten slippery, for example, we make sure we send dispatch crews and make sure we do some spots, sanding and salting. So it's just maintaining an acceptable level of service.
Thank you for that.
We can start.
So in keeping with the question here to the first item on an expense reduction, just as a matter of process, I take it that we would make a motion to direct administration to incorporate that expense reduction into the 2024 capital or 2024 operating budget And then hopefully, as we go through this, administration will be keeping track of all of these for us to be able to then eventually come to a number. So with that, I would move that based on recommendations here from administration that we do incorporate an expense reduction in the operating budget as it relates to the winter contracted services regarding roads by an amount of $40,000.
Thank you. Councillor Melvin. Is there any debate on that motion? And can anyone confirm whether or not Councillor Keller-Hranty is part of the meeting?
He's not right now.
She's not. All right. I will look only at this table then. If there is no debate, I will call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Moving down. Councillor Melnick?
In keeping with the spirit of moving this along, I would like to make the motion that we incorporate the service suspension or put a pause on the maintenance of memorial benches, and that this reduced maintenance, the operating budget should reflect a saving of $15,918 in the 2024 budget.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick, for that motion. Is there any debate? Councillor Waxer.
Not a debate, but a question. Would this result in a layoff or reduced staffing?
Your worship, to answer that question, no, we would just be directing our efforts elsewhere.
Councillor Doyle.
I'm not going to support this one. And I appreciate administration trying to find every nook and cranny that we can save. I want to try to promote some better maintenance on these things, and I know that does come at it as an expense. But people go through quite a bit of an extent and to get these things built. There's to honor people that have served or lived in the community, and I think it's important to keep homage. I think it was when this memorial bench program came on, it was with good intent. And if we can explore applications like better environmentally friendly urethanes to extend the life of these things by 5-10 years, then we're going to be saving money down the road. So I'm just challenging the process. I'm not going to get into the weeds on how administration or operations maintains these things. But to me, it's just $16,000. I know a bunch of $16,000 are going to add up to a certain percentage somewhere. But that's why I'm not going forward with this.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Any other debates? I will call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion is carried.
Okay.
Councillor Hall or Deputy Mayor Hall?
Well, next, I'd like to make the motion to direct administration to add $17,897 to the budget in Alberta Education Program Unit funding increase for the wildflower daycare.
Thank you for that motion, Deputy Mayor Hall. Is there any debate on that motion? Seeing nothing, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried.
I know we're in motions.
Deputy Mayor Hall.
Just regarding the next item, Mike, I have a question for Director Reed. Do you anticipate this increase of $6,000 being more year after year with this position?
Your worship, through the Deputy Mayor Hall, it is certainly realistic and reasonable to expect that, yes. With our increased, attractability or attractions that we're creating with this renovation project, I entirely believe that we will be able to have increased revenue. I couldn't tell you what that's going to be until we get the person in place and see what kind of work they're able to accomplish.
In your worship, for Deputy Mayor Hall, so as Director Reed said, you know, we can't make any future year predictions. Certainly the intent here was to say, well, could we at least manage to do, you know, 3 events, you know, 3 activities of some kind that generated an additional $2,000 in revenue per activity. It's probably attainable. And we would certainly like to do more than that in future years. I would point out that this change, if council is considering making it, would be subject to the fact that there would be a position there to do this function. So if a decision, a discussion around the function later on happens, then this revenue will also go away.
Councillor Waxer.
I was going to say, I'm thinking we should delay that one until after the discussion on the position occurs.
Deputy Mayor Hall.
I'll get another one then. I'd like to make a motion to direct administration to add $14,357 to the budget in a change in expected revenue and staffing costs at OOSC.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. Is there any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Want to rule? Councillor Waxman.
I would make a motion that that council direct administration to reduce contracted expenses in community development to $7,500.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Waxer. Is there any debate on that? Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I do not support this motion. I actually don't support getting rid of this money at all. We are making great progress in our path to truth and reconciliation, and I want to keep this in the budget.
I appreciate it as debate, and so perhaps I will ask Councillor Waxer whose motion it is. You had inquired of Director Reed about the fact that we had brought in people in the last year on the existing budget. Are you satisfied that we can't continue to do that with the existing budget, that we need an increase?
Sorry, could you repeat your question?
Certainly, your question to Director Reed earlier was how we managed to bring people into the community for Indigenous training in the existing budget, why we would need an increase. And I'm not sure that I understood the response to suggest that we necessarily needed an increase to maintain the level of engagement that we've had in the last year, which has been, I think, has been very appropriate. We've had lots of opportunity to engage the Indigenous community and acquire learning, and we've done that on last year's budget. So why do we need an increase this year to do the same thing?
I interpreted Director Reed's comments as uncertain that he would be able to maintain that level, and in fact I had detected some hesitancy that there would be the ability to do any, and so I was looking. I am very hesitant to stop that work, so I was going halfway in the spirit of reducing the budget, but also ensuring that we maintain momentum.
Any further debate? Well, Director Reed, you can't debate, but we'll pretend there's a question out there for you to answer.
Your worship, I don't need to interfere with the process.
Your hand is up, clarification is always beneficial.
The clarification is, I do not have access to the funding we had this year. I want to make that very clear. There may be other opportunities, as there always are, but I do not have access to the funding I had this year.
Sorry, this is what I was trying to get. I believe administration received a grant that enabled us to undertake some of the activities that council participated in this year. As Director Reed said, maybe there would be in the future, maybe there won't be, but there's no existing dollars to do activities like we did this year. So even at that pace that we were moving this year, certainly the $15,000 would be dedicated funds that would allow a more frequent engagement. Really, this is about a question of how fast or slow. And the monies that we used in 2023 came from other sources, and they don't exist in the 2024 budget from municipal sources.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Island, and thank you for that, Director CEO Given. How fast or slow, it's not really up to us. We were invited to an engagement in end of September. Councillor Lowe and I attended because this First Nation out of Kamloops area found our strategic priorities on our website and invited us. So I'm hesitant to get rid of this because I don't want that to happen again. If an engagement comes up, we get invited and we can't go.
Councillor DeBona.
Just a question for Councillor Hall, if I may, while we're having debate, just because I'm equally as passionate. So you're saying at any amount, we're just not to move this forward, so no expense reduction in this area whatsoever. Okay, I can support that. So, and even if it's for half the amount, I can't support it because I'm for keeping that 15 grand in there.
If there is no further debate, the motion is to reduce contracted expenses in community development by $7,500. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And I'm taking it that Councillor Keller-Rempe is not available, so that motion is carried. Paid parking. Councillor or Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you. My question is to administration. If we increased our rates by $1 instead of 50 cents, could I assume that we would bring in $160,000 instead of $80,000?
Your worship, through to Deputy Hall. Yes, so it's basically 10% would go to contracted services and 10% then is in policy to go to reserves. So that's where you see that adjustment. So yes.
Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have here the revenue increase of $80,000. Was that based on the motion earlier to add $150,000? Or is this an additional, so in the number you gave of the $1,547,000, is that $150,000 net, 120, call it? And then we're looking at doing potentially another increase on top of that in paid parking.
Your Worship, yeah, I appreciate the question. So the budget document that's in the package shows the visitor paid parking revenue line item, and it reflects revenue forecast, as we said during the delegation portion, of $1.15 million. That is the change that council made. Okay. Administration is suggesting, from our perspective, with minimal change, as Director Malchuk said, that 50 cent an hour change, you could generate an additional $100,000 in total revenue for an additional $80,000 net. I think what, if in terms of interpretation, I think the advice administration would give here is it would be council could direct administration to increase visitor paid parking revenue to a total of 1.35 million. So that would be accepting administration's recommendation that we made today, plus an additional $100,000. The net effect of that would be to reduce the net tax requisition by 160,000. Clear as mud?
No.
Yes.
It's funny.
I'm
confused. Deputy Mayor Hall.
I'd like to make a motion that we direct administration to increase visitor rate parking revenue to a total of $1.35 million. That's generating $160,000 towards the tax envelope. You don't have to add that, but I just.
Thank you for the motion, Deputy Mayor Hall. Is there any debate? Councillor Demota?
Okay, so Councillor Malik made a motion at the last meeting to bring forward, and that was in $150,000 of revenue increase. That's included in here with the 1.25. Right, so when you're talking about backing that up even further.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know where the appetite is from the people that are directly affected and primarily in the commercial sector. So I haven't really heard that input. But if there's a desire there, then I'm willing to explore it. I don't know about making that decision right now. So kind of on a.
Go ahead. Accepted the motion.
Okay.
We're a little out of order, but you
Yeah,
can
no, I'll
close.
close. I can close.
Is there any other debate on the motion? Councillor Melnick.
I'm thinking that, by going to 1.25 million, we're actually increasing our parking revenues by 25% this year, because the original budget did talk about $1 million in the budget, and now we're going to 1.25 million. I think a 35% increase in parking revenues might be a little bit excessive. We may turn, we haven't talked about year-round parking yet. I'm sure that might come up, but I don't think a 35% increase is going to be well received in the business community, and certainly by our visitors who happen to come from the region spring and fall. And I'm not in favor of going beyond the 1.25.
So I don't have to put my own hand up, but I did. I will speak in favor of the motion, recognizing two things: that the business sector has said the burden on them is too great, and this lessens the burden. It transfers it to the visitors, and we have long held that, given that we spend 32% of our expenditures on visitor-facing services and facilities and infrastructure, we should get more from the visitors. And yes, some will complain. I leave it to staff to figure out whether it is, if we achieve this, it's through some combination of rate increase, season extension, and or extending the spaces available, which would only, I think, make sense in the summertime. So I support the effort because I think it is what has been requested of us by the business sector, recognizing that we'll have some repercussions on visitors. But the more important concern for me is that we recognize that if we are faced, for example, with a wildfire, we will miss our revenue target. And then we will be forced to look at reserves. And I can accept that risk. I know that it's there, and things can go awry, but that is exactly what our business sector looks at all the time. That's the same risk that they face. So I'm prepared to face it. So I support the motion. It is one of the few things that we can do to gain revenue from municipal assets and infrastructure. I will allow Councillor Jamodi, you can speak again, and then I will still allow Deputy Mayor Paul to close.
Yeah, and I apologize. I just to clarify on that, and I understand where the mayor's coming from, and I understand in the favor of the argument, but there's no business plan in front of us yet. And the whole matrix on that, we're just arbitrarily throwing a number out there to increase. So yes, we might have a what if of a wildfire, but what if this increase negatively impacts activity in the downtown core. So I get where you're coming from. I want to, like, there's a greedy part of me, and I'm not saying that the motion is greedy. I think like it's important to get that money from tourists, but like to what extent? Like, do we just keep increasing it every year until it's just not applicable anymore? So that's just my apprehension.
Deputy Mayor Hall, close debate.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I think the appetite from the business community is they don't want to pay more taxes. Like, we had a gallery full of people from the business community today, and we still have some here. I don't think going from $3.50 an hour to $4.50 an hour, it's huge. I really don't. I travel around and pay $5 an hour to park downtown or $10, but like, this is the only way visitors directly pay municipality.
All right, debate is closed. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried.
Your worship, just for the clarity of what we're adding, council was presented with $1,547,000, which incorporated $150,000. So really what we end up here is we're increasing revenue by an additional net, call it 160. All right, thank you.
That's correct.
Councillor DeMona.
Yeah, a question on this last revenue increase proposal. Application of accumulated municipal over levy from prior years. And because here is pluralized, on top of the $147,000 that's there, no service impact, but this would talk about changing the tax split from 5 to 1 to something else, or just increasing that one side.
Your worship, for Councilor, no, this would not have any impact on the ratio. This would essentially say that, this would not have any impact on the mill rate ratio. This would be equally applied in that ratio to both commercial and residential properties.
Okay, so having said that, in earlier this year, and I believe May, we approved a motion that we take $250,000 from 2022 and put that towards an RFD for busing infrastructure. I just want to know, is that included in part of this, or is this a different discussion? Can we talk about how far along we are with that path? Because we still haven't decided on going forward with the electric bus proposal. So if that $250,000 is available there on top of that 147, would that potentially, if we change or rescind that past motion, just because I'm thinking about opportunities here, not saying that's where we have to go.
Your worship, for Councilor Moon, no. So this is not a surplus in terms of, so the municipality runs our operations for a year, and there's some areas where we exceed our revenue targets and, or lower than expected expenses, vice versa. And after the close of our business operating year, Director Melanchuk and her team bring all that together and get everybody to finally turn in their receipts and get a final number of whether we, exceeded expectations or, as a municipality, we're required to provide council with a balanced budget. But we do constantly strive throughout the course of the year to exceed the results that we predict in the budget. Sometimes that means that we have an excess of revenue, a surplus. We deal with that surplus on an annual basis. Council has already dealt with the 2022 surplus, and that has been allocated to both reserves and, as you mentioned, put into the budget to support the 2022 operations of transit. The 2023 operations of transit. Administration won't know the 2023 year-end operating surplus until in the new year. That process is typically handled by, as council you will experience many times, the administration comes forward with the report from the auditor saying, here's our audited financial statements and our year-end results and the financial surplus. A change to that process is that we now have a reserve policy that directs where any year-end operating surpluses, how they should be apportioned out into our reserves. That policy is a council policy, and if council wishes to do something different than what the policy says, that's certainly within your right, because you own the policies. I don't know that at this time we have any estimate of what our 2023 year-end will look like, even in terms of an order of magnitude. This is Director Melanchuk's favorite question. I started asking her all the time. But I think, there are a number of operational items and expenses that do trail into the new year in terms of getting the documentation, having it consolidated. So I'd be very reluctant to give council any indication of a suspected surplus. We do know that our paid parking revenue exceeded expectations. Right, our budget said we expected a certain amount of paid parking revenue, and we received more than that. That's why we're comfortable with the recommendation and giving that advice that could be increased. I don't know, Director Melanchuk, if we have some sense of what that's going to look like. Yeah, and so I would say that I would not have a level of confidence to predict what that's going to be at this time, and that may be an additional opportunity in the spring, prior to setting the mill rate, to further reduce the net tax requisition by application of a surplus. But again, our policy does direct the surplus into different savings accounts. Essentially, we heard about the need to prepare for unexpected situations, and a portion of any operating surplus is directed to the fiscal financial stabilization reserve, which would handle those types of situations, unexpected situations. So we won't put out a number today in terms of what an expected year-end surplus, because we haven't closed the year-end.
So for clarity, just because is a motion actually required because the mill rate change, this, you can't make the decision today on the mill rate change, and if we can, are we talking about a minimum this week? I have two questions.
So on that first question, your worship, for Councillor DeVoe, I was just conferring with Director Melanchuk. So if council takes no action, then that would essentially sit in a holding account, a reserve, but to be applied in some future year where our forecast of assessed value is incorrect and needs to be applied at that time.
So it's a minimum of, we can guarantee 147,000 right now, but it could be higher.
Your worship, through to Councillor DeMota, yes, it could be. It's also one other portion that affects that over levy is the supplementary as well. So that can raise that figure, and I'm seeing that it will, not by tons, but it will go up slightly.
So I guess without further, unless there's further questions, I'd like to move that we apply $147,000 of accumulated municipal over levy from prior years to the 2024 budget.
Your worship, the one distinction, I think, and this is not clear in my wording, so it's not a fault no, it's not in a fault in the way the motion's made, it's not there. Director Malinchuk's just reminding me that the distinction there, the phrasing should be to apply it to when establishing the 2024 mill rate. So again, that's just a slight nuance, but I think as I believe it's at the start, we won't be able to show this impact on the net tax. This doesn't lead to a net tax reduction. Will lead to a lower mill rate when we set the mill rate bylaw, which would mean less taxes.
Thank you for helping with that. So I will change that and say that I move that council apply a minimum of $147,000 of accumulated municipal over levy from prior years when establishing the 2024 mill rate. Is that good?
Thank you for that motion. Councillor Demota, everybody understand the nuance? Doesn't change the budget, but it will change the tax levy. There is no debate. I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So it looks to me like we have in the last not quite 2 hours achieved a combination of savings and revenue totaling about $255,000 plus other tax relief of $147,000. So we're up somewhere around $400,000. So $200,000 an hour. That's a good value for our time. So with that, before we get stuck on other things, I think everybody deserves a bit of a break before we do. I want to thank administration for bringing forward Appendix 2 without specific direction, but obviously you're perfectly aware of all the discussions here at this table and in the community, and we're diligent in bringing forward opportunities to reduce the budget, which were even outside those matters that the council looked at. So that's greatly appreciated. I will call a recess in this time, give you a little more time, and we will come back at again 45 minutes after the hour. The hour is now 4 o'clock, so we get an 11-minute recess. Oh.
Right out when I'm.
All right, thank you all. We're all reassembled, and Councillor Keller-Ferranti with us in person. Welcome.
Thank you.
I will call us back into session. We have, I think, finally finished with the Appendix 2, except for the utility, but I would propose maybe we finish with the operating budget first and come back to it, but somebody wanted to move ahead and take this off, so we don't have to come back to it, that would be fine as well before we lose sight of it. Councillor Gordon.
Well, I have a question on the $100,000 and again, apologizing if it's going to be repetitive. I think we lost Mr. Greathead, but hopefully CAO Given can answer this. The $100,000 that's proposed here includes the bulk water and sani dump potential revenue increase. I remember when the initial conversation came up prior to going for an RFP, that number was exorbitantly higher, like in the $250,000 area. And is this just is there another $150,000 that's already included in there, or is this another $100,000 that we think we can increase from bulk water rates and sandy dump charges?
Your worship, thanks for Councilor Demota. Thanks for the question. So this reflects administration's I think a conservative recommendation. I wouldn't say that it's overly conservative, but it is reflective of the fact that this is completely unknown. I think we can, had previously made some estimates or some high level estimates based on what we see and what we feel might be happening at our current bulk water filling station. Again, we don't have enough data to be able to really speak to that with any confidence. I think that there's the potential that in that 2025 year, this number could increase, but administration doesn't have a level of confidence to recommend that it should be higher than 100,000 at this time. Again, a bit like paid parking. Our administrative confidence increases once we start to see some actuals, and that's where coming into budget 2024, the presentations here, we recommended on our own that paid parking revenue could increase, and we found our way to say, okay, yeah, and you know what, it could increase even a bit more beyond that, and we're very comfortable we can meet those targets. This is one where we have no data. And we do still need to have the system operational. And so we don't, we can't say this is going to start as of January 1, right? And so because of those reasons and that uncertainty, our advice would be that this is an appropriate amount. It is not overly aggressive. It is also not undershooting. It's probably about right for a year where we don't have any priors to work from. And I just want to acknowledge that it also would require an increase in the rates for bulk water. So again, that's different than the rates that an average homeowner or property owner or business owner would be paying for service to the property. This is a rate that somebody would pay as a part of the inclusion here. And there are certain types of businesses that would feel this, but they wouldn't have felt the impact from the CCC model startup, right? Because these are, essentially businesses that are operating sort of mobile, tours or other things. So it's conservative. We don't believe it's overly conservative. And if we can increase in the future year, then we say yes.
All right. Well, I think it's conservative, but that's just me feeling it out. And but this is $100,000 on top of paying back some of that capital in debenture. So this is $100,000 in clear revenue on top of all the expenses that. And I'll let you finish that, because where I'm going is, yes, we might not have this bulk water station running as of January 1st, but the utility rates will take an effect on the water side on the 1st of January. People will be getting their bills at the beginning of March, at the end of February, correct? It's a 2-month cycle. So we heard from the business community, and I'm getting back to this because we also got a report or information that our residents don't pay as much in taxes overall. This is utilities, and this is on top of what we've already decided and on in the prior part of the appendix. So because this is a different area, I am also looking to find some relief with regards to the non-residential component of this. So $100,000, I'm willing to go higher if anybody's interested.
Mr. Given.
Your worship, sorry, if I might, just so and I'm Director Melanchuk, I'll just make sure that you're listening so that in case I mess this up. So the effect of this would be to increase a revenue line item, and that would reduce the need to increase general rates across the rest of the system. We'd say this one portion, bulk water sales, will produce more revenue. It won't reduce the overall revenue need for the utility, but it will say more of that needed revenue will come from bulk water sales than from sales to property owners.
It's just kind of making a shift.
So it would be making a shift to a different type of utility ratepayer, away from property owners and businesses and residents to bulk water purchasers.
Because primarily we have fixed costs, we can't change those.
That's right.
Go ahead, Mrs. Director Malachine.
Thank you. Just add a little bit more onto that, thinking about, you know, being a budget that supports itself. Basically at the moment, because the levy would be a little bit higher if you're bringing in more money, then you would offset those levies that you would be bringing in from the CCC model. So you'd be able to reduce that. Basically with 100,000, it's reducing it to a point where there's not much change in the water levy impact from 2023 to 2024. And if it was further reduced, it would be, it would actually go the other way. So it would actually reduce the cost, the levies that were collected in 2023. Because it balances to a zero.
Thank you for that. Councillor Keller.
I apologize if they explained this earlier in the stream to you, there in history. It's 100,000 new revenue. What would the current bulk water be? So are we don't charge for now?
Your worship, for Councillor Keller MP, we do charge for bulk water. The proposal here is A, an increase in the rate, and B, an expectation that we would see increased compliance and payment for actual amount of water consumed. The current system, you know, relies on people accurately recording the amount of water that they take. And we don't have any security or any method to ensure that they have accurately recorded what they've consumed. Under the new system, you know, we would be able to improve that accuracy, and this proposal assumes an increase in the actual sort of cubic meter rate, as well as, and I'll sort of looking at Director Greathead, as well as being able to charge for the sanding dump, which is not something that we currently offer. So it's essentially an entirely new business line, if you want to call it that, where we're able to charge for a service that we couldn't previously charge for.
Thank you for that.
Director Greathead.
Your worship, if I might add, this revenue that we're expecting to get from bulk water, I think it's going to help offset some of the sticker shock that we may see coming up from the utilities master plan that's being developed right now. So I wouldn't want to work towards a zero balance rate using that money. I think that we're going to have to be cautious going forward with what we do for funding our utilities and our replacement renewal projects in the future.
Councillor Demoda.
Well, it's another interesting thing, and you know, because of our visitors in our community, we have a shift in our recycling collection, our garbage collection, and water and sewer consumption. I was talking to the general manager of the Athabasca Hotel yesterday, just because we were talking about things and utilities came up, and they have calculated that they go through 15,000 gallons of extra water because of the extra flushes. They get 100 people a day come through the door just to use the bathroom because of their location in their lobby, off their lobby. And when you factor that into cubic meters, it ends up being a lot. And, you know, they're taking a lot of that burden from visitor service. And, you know, the question I ask, are you recouping in that revenue from people being attracted into your restaurants or your bars and stuff? And they said probably 1%. And okay, so that does have a little bit of an effect, but when you have businesses like that, and that's just one on the corner. So you think about all the other places in there. I think that we need to find, you know, other avenues to really help compensate some of that tourism flow, so to speak. And so I just thought I'd throw that out there. So what I want to challenge administration and operations to, you know, like, if we go to 150,000, is that going to be something that we can push? And then if we didn't reach that, where would we go for that money? But it'd have to come out of reserves, right?
Your worship, for Councillor Demota. So again, administration wouldn't recommend additional beyond the 100,000 because we don't have any data based on, our level of comfort of saying, sure, go ahead on paid parking is based on the fact that we know the volumes, we can do some calculations. This we just don't. So our recommendation would be 100, and it's up to council, is about your risk tolerance. If this did not materialize, whatever revenue, and this is the same for any area where we suggested that revenue increases. The revenue increase doesn't materialize, then it would have to be covered off, presumably from reserves at year end. In the case of our utility operating reserve, we are forecasting a very small balance at the end of 2024 of 250,000. So we are, so I would, again, if this 100,000 doesn't materialize, because it turns out everybody was correctly recording the amount of water that they were taking, then that loss would have to be offset from this account that we're seeing would just have about $250,000 in it next year.
Go ahead, Councillor.
So when we look at the net tax envelope and we look at the total utility budget and the year-over-year change of $651.96, applying this $100,000 will bring that down to $551 and change. 551,000. No.
Your worship, for Councillor Demota, this I think gets back to that shifting. So we would still need the 651,000 in added revenue compared to last year, but that added revenue would be coming now from bulk water sales rather than from sales to property owners. So still 651, but really what we're saying is, well, we know that 651 won't have to be exclusively on residential and non-residential utility ratepayers for properties.
Without the use of our sewage treatment plant, that water is now clear. It's not muddy anymore, so I got it.
Go ahead, Councillor.
There are no other questions.
I have one for Mr. Grayhead. The Annex 2 suggests that this increased revenue target would require bulk water rates to increase to market. What is the level of that increase? Either in dollar amounts or percentages, whatever you want.
Your worship, typical bulk water rates are between $10 and $12 per cubic meter throughout the province. That's what it goes for. And we would be jumping from $1.43 per cubic meter reported on the honor system. That would go up to $10 per cubic meter. One of the other problems that we do have is sometimes if we have a user that only uses say 10 cubic meters of water, so that's like not quite $11 worth of water. The minimum charge is $78 for the way our billing system is right now. So sometimes we end up accumulating a few months to make it reasonable to bill somebody when there's that kind of disparity. With a system that it would just be an absolute paid for use and paid for the quantity of water that's taken from the town.
So the rate goes up. What changes with the honor system other than potentially fewer people being honorable?
The way we're building this is that it would be a computer controlled access, so that there be either a PIN system where the account holders could access the water by punching in their codes, or a Visa or credit card. So we're going to have multiple pay options for local users as well as out of town users to be able to access the system simply.
There's some cost to that. So the 100,000 that we're talking about, is that net or gross?
Your worship, that the cost of that system, I mean, aside from potentially credit card processing fees, which the municipality already processes credit card fees in a number of areas, so I don't know if there, be additional costs, but there certainly would be some smaller percentage that would come off that. The costs of building this new system are already being borne by the municipality in the construction of the new sanding dump station.
Deputy Mayor Halton.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I'm not a bulk water buyer. Who is that customer? Just curious.
We have local providers that service some of the outlying residents, like Patricia, like bungalows. Also, we have the hydrovac trucks and a lot of the construction companies. Trans Mountain was using quite a bit. Parks Canada surprisingly uses a fair bit of water as well. So there's only a few local providers. The bulk of bulk water sales, I would believe, go to actually out of town uses, or sorry, in town uses, but for out of town providers.
Councillor Keller-Grant.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm huge to straight it. So for the sandy dump, then like it would be gated, it has to use a credit card to use it, right?
We're still figuring out some of the ladder logic programming on how we're going to run the sandy dump side on there. We do have a plan that when the user makes a payment, that it'll engage the pump and allow access to the clean water side of it to wash down and refill the tanks that are in the campers and the buses. And then it'd be about, we're estimating at most a 7-minute cycle that they would have to finish their business and then vacate before the gate closes down. So that's what we're working on. And then once we do go through commissioning, we're going to actually have to field fit this and make sure that our timing points are right. So there's still a little bit of legwork to do to figure this out. But nothing seems complicated.
Thank you.
Councillor DeMona, last question on this. Is a motion actually necessary, or is this just kind of a placeholder because it doesn't really affect the bottom line in the budget at all? And this would just be a product of a forecasting change, and the real commitment would come in when we're setting water rates, right? And right now, no one's going to benefit from this until that money starts coming in for bulk water, and the bulk of that won't be till August, probably, right? So, and that's assuming that we get it running in, in the warmer months, so to speak. So, like, no one's going to really reap the benefits from this until it actually starts coming in as revenue.
Yeah, Your Worship, we're just sort of conferring over here. Although it wouldn't change the 650 number that we were talking about in terms of that sort of summary page, it does change a line in the budget. If you go into the operating budget for utilities under levies, there's a number for the water levy. It's currently showing a plus minus increase of $101,000. And Director Malinchuk informs me that this would essentially impact that plus minus. It would mean that doesn't have to increase by $101,000. It can increase by $1,000.
I got muddy again.
Hot water's good.
Yeah.
Oh,
Speaking of water.
I thought someone had a cherry phone.
Yeah.
We have bulk water for tea now, if anybody's interested.
So Your Worship, yes,
a motion would be appropriate, is what I got from that. So Councillor DeMona.
Yeah.
Sure. I move that council direct administration to increase revenue forecast for bulk water sales towards the 2024 full utility budget
In the amount
of $100,000. Thank you.
All right, is there any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Now we are potentially at a point where we had 21 motions, a few weeks ago to add things to the budget. Does anybody want to revisit any of those? Are there any other items that any councillor has? That will affect budget, either operating or utilities. Utilities, I expect that we've covered, but I'm open to any other suggestions.
You can satisfy.
Councillor or Deputy Mayor Hall?
A question for, I guess, Director Melchuk, do you have a new number with what we've just done?
Your worship, through to Deputy Mayor Hall, and very close, not quite there.
Your worship, I think Director Malachuk's working it into the overall fancy net tax requisition summary page, which requires some other changes, but I've been keeping track of it in a simple way. So we started with a net tax increase at the start of today's meeting, proposed at 1.547649. The changes that would impact the net tax requisition total 255,672. For a resulting new net tax increase of 1,291,977.
So what was the total?
1291.
Basically 1.3 now.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor Hall?
Thank you. Question again, that number 1.291 and change, does that include the recommended amount from the reserves on top of that? Like there was a recommended amount out, I think, the stabilization fund?
It does.
It does, okay.
So your worship, that number is inclusive of all of the changes council previously made, as well as all the other budget assumptions that administration built for base budget on. So that is reflective of any strategies that administration recommended employing, any changes council recommended or directed at the committee of the whole meetings over 2 days, and the changes that were made today.
Not the 147.
Except of course the ones that don't apply to the net tax requisition. Other changes were made and passed by council today. Those included the application of the prior year over levy when setting the mill rate in the spring. That'll be $147,000 change, as well as the increase in revenue in the bulk water, as we just discussed at length, which would essentially shift the increased revenue requirement away from residential and commercial utility repairs.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question for administration. And it may have been answered and addressed, and it may not have been. We had a motion in our November 21st budget meeting regarding that we directed administration to provide additional information on the carpool vehicles. And I'm thinking, have we seen that or have we not yet?
Your worship, I may answer that question to Councillor Melnick. What I ended up deciding is bumping that request through to 25 and 26 to be able to do a full analysis, realizing that a lot of the expenses I was thinking, are going through the expense claims, but actually they're on visas, they're all over the place. So it's just going to be easier to start tracking in January, do the full analysis and have the correct numbers, and we can wait on that one. I think we've been waiting long enough, so one more year won't hurt.
And that change is reflected in the capital budget that's in front of council here today.
Thank you for that.
One of the motions that council made arising either the 21st or 22nd of November was a motion to bring forward the addition of the community recreation and cultural programmer as a 2-year term position. Can administration tell me what that actual cost is in budget?
Your worship, yes, and this is from Dr. Melanchuk. And so the cost of the culture and rec programming position is reflected as $76,563. In the 2024 budget.
If I, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Elleran.
Thank you, Mayor Arlen, driven. I got this kind of went out as you were answering that on what funding that position would bring in. Well, I think I got it was kind of less than 10,000. I just want to.
Yeah, Your Worship, one of the additional items that administration offered today was a recognition that this position, if it was in place, would be intended to generate new revenue through creating new programming, new options that people would pay to access. We hadn't included any additional revenue as a result. And so, you know, in our further review said, oh, we should be recognizing there will be some revenue attached to this. We put it in Appendix 1 as approximately 6,000 as a start, again, with the intention to grow that over time. And Director Reed offered today that you know, a corresponding reduction in contracted services of approximately 10,000 could be achieved, so that the operational budget changes if council wish to. I'll play out both scenarios. This is not to argue one way or the other. If council wish to leave the position in and recognize increased revenue and decrease expenses, you could make each of those, you know, increase revenue by $6,000, decrease contracted expenses by 10,000, for a net effect of 16,000, with the position still there. If council wish to remove the position, obviously you don't get to reduce contracted services or increase revenue, but then you would have the change of 76,563 to the overall budget.
Thank you for that.
Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I'm not sure I can support this at this time. I feel we need to wait until the activity center renovation is complete.
Yeah.
Deputy,
That's okay. Oh, sorry.
Councillor DeMona.
Thank you, Jojo. Son. I'm curious about the process. I know that we're here because that was brought up earlier, but was the intention to go along with the email that was sent out with regards to how things progressed through the last meeting, like the motions? Was that the intention today? Just tackle those things, like for an example, motion 506/23. And going forwards, then 507, 508, are we going to address those amounts in that order? Was that the intention today, or are we going through department by department? I just want to be clear because I'm a little scattered right now. I want to make sure I'm in line with the intention.
Your worship, certainly up to council how you would like to work through them. As you know, there's only a handful of positions. There's the 5 positions that are under consideration. And to be clear, all of them are included council direction. They're all included in this budget. So dealing with any of those would be a motion to remove. Any of the other items, community group funding, for example, would be a motion to reduce community group funding to group by blank dollars. And so I think in whatever order council would wish to do that, it's certainly up to you, and this administration will record the action.
My hope is that if any counselor has reconsidered the motions that we made to add things to the agenda, they will bring it forward now. The intent, I thought, was, well, add them and we'll see what things look like. We've heard that from other perspectives, it doesn't look very appetizing. And so if anybody wants to reconsider, I'm telling my interest is primarily in the positions, although there are a couple of other motions that I would be interested in revisiting, but I don't think we need to go through every motion, but any motion where any counselor has a concern about the fact that we at least provisionally added those items to the agenda. Now is the time to address them. Deputy Mayor Hall.
I'll make a motion at this time. I'd like to direct administration to remove position of program coordinator within the community development department. Is that works?
Thank you for the motion. Deputy Mayor Hall, do you wish to speak to it any further? No. Okay. Any other debate? I am supportive on the basis that, although I appreciate the capacity issue from staff perspective, it is a challenge, and positions in particular are challenging because this is how our budget year over year keeps growing. Once you add a position, it is there. And although the position might be a good position to have eventually, this might not be the year for it. We are faced with a significant increase, and I'm inclined to support the motion made by the deputy mayor to give relief this year, and also recognizing that we do have people who do programming, and even if it's not in their job description, perhaps job descriptions can be amended so that others can do programming. And so we had a discussion a week ago, and Director Reed made his case, but the community has also spoken, and I feel obligated to listen to that. And I find that now is not the time to be adding positions, at least not this one. Any further debate? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Any other motions? Councilor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. This would be a motion that might require you to recluse yourself as it relates to the Uplift Festival.
All right then. I will do it position. It's a motion and it's in order.
It's in order to have His Worship leave prior to the motion, I would think.
And it is in order to make the motion. We don't have to deal with positions. We can deal with anything that is presented by a councillor. And so,
yeah, I think we're asked to go through the
deal with
uplift.
I will declare a conflict, and I will recuse the chair and relinquish it to Deputy Mayor Paul.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. And thank you, councillors, for bearing with me here. We did have a conversation. We did have a presentation by Mr. Island, and his presentation was to bring forward the various benefits for the Uplift Festival. Some of them are intangible, some of them are tangible. And the ask was for $25,000 cash. When we had this discussion back in November, we had an opportunity to, I had an opportunity to bring up a different dollar amount. And I'd like to take that opportunity to modify that ask that was voted on. And I would recommend a $10,000 cash donation as opposed to the full 25, which would save us $25,000. So I would make the motion to reduce the
15,000.
15.
Yeah, 2020 minus.
Yeah. Right, sorry. And my intention was to reduce it to $10,000. So to reduce it by $15,000 to a total amount of 10, and look forward to council debate.
Any debate or a debate from council? Sir?
Not totally ready. I wasn't expecting this so soon. I think it's absolutely critical that we do stay involved in Uplift. I think Uplift, it changes the view of the community, and I think if we're not in the game, then the appearance of the community changes without our input. So I still believe that active participation and being involved in Uplift, and I think even the title of Uplift at a time where we got a sense of people feeling down is still is an important contribution to the community.
Councillor Kelleher.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. I can support $10,000, and also I do believe the municipality helps out in kind with equipment, and I do support that as well. To work with Uplift, and but again, we need to push the numbers, and I think 10,000 is good.
I also will support this. I support it because we need to cut this budget, not because I think that Uplift needs to get to a place where they can bring in revenue, because they can't. I want to support this. We have opportunity going forward in the next few years, but I will support the 10,000 the motion. Any other councillors wish to speak to motion? Councillor Loda?
No, I think this one, like the added benefit, it's tough, right? But then, you know, when you go and look at the enhancement of our community, I'd like to see some more participation from Tourism Jasper financially on this one, but I can't really say anything without having their budget in front of us or having someone here to ask questions. Just because of that added benefit to the community, and I think it's just something that, you know, there is some tourism base around that. I don't have any tangible information that would indicate that. It's all anecdotal and intangibles, like what they spoke of. But I do think that there is a benefit to the community that for other things to do in town when people are coming here to visit. And so I'm kind of stuck here because I really want to support these guys, and our town is just so much better with this artwork, and it inspires local artists, like kids in school and all that. So like, there's so many things that, you know, it's hard for me to take away, and I'm the one that's really wanting to tighten the belt on things, and this isn't an area where I want to do that. So I'm not going to be in favor of the decrease.
I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. I'm going to ask a question of administration while we wait. I'm curious if, so I know that Uplift is now part of Communities in Bloom. Is that correct?
Potentially, yeah. We haven't done it.
Deputy Mayor Hall, no, administration has advertised for Communities in Bloom members. I think we sent a note around saying that we'll be re-advertising, or we certainly will soon be sending something around to say that we'll be re-advertising. Uplift had invited a member of council to sit on their advisory committee. And so I think it's the other way around. Uplift has a committee and they've invited council to have a representation there.
I just seem to recall the committee, I believe Councillor Waxer has been appointed to, is Communities in Bloom / Uplift. Is that no?
No. I don't know whether there was some other intention, but Communities in Bloom is a municipality of Jasper committee that the municipality of Jasper has terms of reference, and we've advertised for public members to sit on. Councillor Waxer, I believe, has been appointed to serve on that. Separately, another organization that's not us, Uplift, has a committee, and they had invited the municipality to appoint somebody, and Councillor Waxer has been appointed by council to serve on that. So there's two different entities. They're not the same. They're not the same thing. Just so happens that Councillor Waxer is doing both of them.
Councillor Waxer?
I think that you are correct. They were grouped together as an appointment, but they are separate groups.
Okay. I will hand the mic back to Mayor Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. Councillor Meldick.
It would appear to be that time, Your Worship. And I would make a motion that we agree to extend the meeting beyond 4 hours.
Call the question. All those in favor? It hasn't moved yet.
One opposed.
Yes.
You didn't call for it. I'm waiting.
I wasn't sure whether you were playing a game. You're opposed?
Yes.
I think the procedure by law requires unanimity. So let us confirm. Because if it does, we're done for today.
Your Worship, we'll just have to take a second to.
Yep. I'm not sure that I can call a recess if we're actually adjourned. But yes, take a moment.
Yeah, some glad. Oh, no, there you go. So as thanks to Director Nadon. 16.2 regular meetings. A meeting of council shall not exceed 4 hours length unless the members present unanimously consent to an extension. If an extension is not approved, any remaining agenda items will be considered at the next regular meeting or at a special meeting called to complete the business. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for December 19th. And so these items would come forward and the business can continue there unless council wishes to schedule a separate special meeting.
All right, so councillors, if they wish, can take a look at the special meeting requirements at their pleasure, and those rules either provide that the mayor may call a special meeting or must on direction of councillors. So if there are special councillors who want a special meeting, that is in your hands. Otherwise, it is something that I can manage. Otherwise, December 19th. Is our next regular council meeting. And with that, I'm sorry, Councillor Calhoun.
Mayor, if this went to December 19th, could we start the meeting at 9:30 in the morning, make it an all-day council meeting? Because I would hate to start at 1:30, we get to 5:30, we don't go, so that brings us into January for budget.
I'm going to suggest that we are in no position to make a decision now because we are adjourned. So if you wanted to bring that forward at the next committee of the whole, we can deal with it because I think we are incapable of making decisions right now because we are not constituted. We are adjourned. So there we go. All right, thank you for those who were watching online, and thank you for those who attended and the one who remained through it all. Thank you very much. Appreciate that support, and this will continue either on the 19th of December at an unspecified time, subject to the will of council, or at some earlier date as council may hold a special meeting for this purpose. That we are done for today. Thank you.